Are we live?
Kate, we are live.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Really glad to see everybody for our last Strategic Growth Council meeting of 2020. And before we do the roll call, I wanted to welcome our newest council member, UC Merced Chancellor Juan Munoz, who was just appointed to the Strategic Growth Council by the governor. And I am particularly excited to have Chancellor Munoz join us. His background, I don't know that you could find a background with like more of the elements of the things that we work on at the Strategic Growth Council. Chancellor Munoz's parents immigrated from Mexico, and his father worked in the agricultural fields in San Joaquin Valley. So a close connection to the work we're doing on Salk and talking about today. Was in the Marine Corps, worked for the UCs, worked for the state system, California public schools through and through, and then went on to Texas to work there for a number of years before coming back to UC Merced. And I was just looking at your background, Chancellor Munoz, and seeing that besides the fact of having agriculture in your family, he also was on the Parks and Recreation Board when he was working in LA. So Wade, there's something for you. Worked on the Workforce Investment Board and the Youth Council in LA. Led University of Houston's response to Hurricane Harvey when he was there. So climate resilience and actual academic work in data science and education. So just a huge amount of relevant work in a lot of places, and just really thrilled also to have representation from the Central Valley. Something the governor really prioritized last year in the Regions Rise Together effort was bringing more inland voices to our boards and commissions, and that's happening across a number of them, but really excited that you're here. So Chancellor Munoz, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we get started.
Well, great, Kate. I just wanted to thank you for that very kind introduction. I want to tell everyone how excited I am to work with this group, a very impressive group, and to contribute, hopefully, in some meaningful way. The work of the council is so vitally important for the entire state, but I think also to set an example for our country of what it means to be sensitive, sustainable, resilient, and planful. And so I'm thrilled to be part of this this group and the council, of course, and to be reunited with the former colleague of mine from Texas as well, Secretary Castro Ramirez. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. We're thrilled to have you. And can I just ask before roll call that either if you are on the council or if you are representing your principal on the council, just to turn your camera on so that you show up at the top of the screen so I know who's here. And I will we'll get started with roll call. Doug, are you going to call the roll?
Yes. Chair Gordon.
Here.
Vice Chair Flatt. Secretary Blumenfeld.
Here.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
I'm here.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Here.
Secretary Galley. Secretary Kim.
Here.
Secretary Ross. Councilmember Capertz.
Here.
And Councilmember Munoz.
Presente.
We have a quorum.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn for just a minute on some housekeeping to Sandra Lupien from SGC.
Thank you, Chair Gordon, and thanks to everyone for joining us today, whether you're online or if you're joining us by phone through the Zoom webinar platform, or if you're tuning in on YouTube, where we are live streaming the meeting. I'm here to provide some information to help us all guide us all through the processes for this remote meeting, which we've designed with the intention of maximizing access by members of the public. For those joining the webinar online via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone is automatically muted when you join the meeting. That's in order to minimize the risk of background noise, and you won't be able to mute or unmute your phone yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform doesn't enable video for attendees, so we won't be able to see your faces during the meeting. If you need technical assistance during the meeting or have questions about the meeting process, there's a few ways to contact us. If you're using the online Zoom webinar, the best way is by using the Q&A function, which several members of our SGC team are going to be monitoring throughout the meeting. And if you've joined by phone and you have access to email, the best thing to do is to email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov, And finally, if you don't have access to email, feel free to text or call 916-634-3359. Now I want to give some instructions about what to do if you're planning to make public comment today. First, if you are planning to make public comment, you must be joining the meeting by Zoom, not on YouTube, either through the webinar or phone option. Your first step is to visit sgc.ca.gov and go to the meetings page and complete the public comment form linked there. You'll need to complete a separate form for each item on which you wish to speak today, and you may complete a form at any time during the meeting. When Chair Gordon opens the public comment period for your item, I'll read the names of everyone who submitted a form for that item. When you hear your name in the list, please raise your hand. The way to raise your hand online in Zoom is by clicking Raise Hand under the Participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. And if you're on the phone, you raise your hand by pressing *9. When it's your turn to speak, a member of our team will unmute your microphone. If you're online, you'll see a window pop up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You will need to click the option to approve unmute. After that, just begin to speak. And if you're on the phone, you'll hear a recorded message alerting you that your line is unmuted, and you can just begin to speak at that time. Each speaker today will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. If you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen, so please monitor that and wrap up your remarks accordingly. And whether you're online or on the phone, Chair Gordon will notify you when your time's up. After that, we will mute your microphone, and you don't need to take any additional action. Finally, if you are unable to complete the online public comment form but would like to make a public comment, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. And finally, members of the council, this one's for you. To notify Chair Gordon that you'd like to enter the discussion, simply use the raise hand function in Zoom, and she'll call on you in turn. After you speak, please click the button to lower your hand. Thanks so much. Back to you, Chair Gordon.
Thank you. That is great. Lots of process in these meetings, and just another reminder to the council itself that when we are in comment and discussion period for the council, to use the raise hand function so I can see you if you can. I know that that for some people it's not easy to get to because of your Zoom system. So I will also be watching you all. Next item 3 is the approval of the minutes from last time. Any comments or concern or edits to the minutes, or do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Any second?
I second.
Oh, I heard Secretary Blumenfeld first. Welcome, Secretary Ross, by the way. Okay, let's just do a quick vote.
Chair Gordon,
Aye.
Secretary Blumenfeld,
Aye.
Secretary Castro Ramirez,
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot,
Aye.
Secretary Kim,
Aye.
Secretary Ross,
Aye.
Councilmember Capretz,
Aye.
Councilmember Munoz.
Now, Douglas, do I am I empowered to vote given that I wasn't at the meeting, or do I abstain?
You may vote, but you may also choose to abstain if you wish.
I'd like to abstain.
Very well. Motion still carries.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. Now we will go to our usual section 4, which is council member updates, and for Chancellor Munoz's awareness. This is really a time for the members of the council who all work on issues that are so related to SGC's work to just weigh in with key issues that they're seeing in their agencies, or just key comments that they want to make at this moment. So it's a great opportunity to hear from across the state and also from our public members about what's happening on the ground. And I will just really briefly start by, just because this meeting is so going to heavily focus on the Sustainable Ag Land Conservation Program and on the value of natural working lands in general, just to say, again, and we talked a bit about this at the last meeting, but how I think important it is, and the governor's executive order shows this, and the work that we're all doing shows how important our natural working lands are to achieving our state's climate goals and to achieving that sustainable growth strategy that we all are so focused on. And we obviously at the state play an important role in in achieving balance across our natural and working lands, which are, I realized the other day, I'm sure this is not news to many of you, but something like 94% of California, because I think we live on 6% of our land in California. So it is pretty amazing to think about that and to think about the diversity and variation and different functions that the land and ecologies and habitats that are on our natural working lands. So excited to hear more about the role that SALC plays in that. But I know it's just such a huge, important commitment of the governor and of the state. And I will actually just, without seeing a hand, turn to Secretary Crowfoot, because I know he plays a massive role in that section area as well. And so turn to him for any comments or updates.
I always promise myself I'm not going to be that person to talk on mute. And then, of course, I do that in my first comments of the meeting. But anyway, it's good to be with you. And welcome, Chancellor. We certainly have made a lot of progress this fall in following the governor's lead to double down on climate action. And I just want to share with you how excited we are to advance one of those executive orders focused on nature-based solutions in 2021, which of course includes building a pathway to conserving 30% of our state by 2030, and then also using our natural and working lands, as Kate references, to both address our climate challenge, conserve biodiversity, maintain food security, and advanced economic prosperity. So really excited about that. And the SALC program, which we'll be discussing today, is a really good example of how a single program can deliver on conservation, climate, economic development, and equity goals. So really excited with both the broader effort and the role SALC plays in that. Since that executive order, there have been some milestone announcements, including memorandum of understanding or agreement between several of our agencies and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. NASA, of course, employs satellites for a number of reasons, including to study our planet. And so this agreement is fairly groundbreaking in that we're going to work more closely with them to utilize data that their satellites and remote sensing, as well as in situ monitors, are collecting for the benefit of our environmental management, including the implementation of that executive order. We're proud to announce the release of a report called Cutting the Green Tape, with specific recommendations focused on how we can more quickly and cost effectively enable environmental restoration to occur. This is a multi-agency effort and spearheaded in partnership with an external association called the Landscape Stewardship Network. That network is formed of nonprofits, local government organizations, as well as federal and state agencies. So excited to find ways to help effective restoration happen more quickly. And then just yesterday, we were able to announce California's formal engagement for the first time in this United Nations effort to develop an international agreement to preserve biodiversity called the Convention on Biodiversity. California will be playing a role as an official observer, which institutionalizes us as a key subnational participant in that effort. You know, we've talked a lot about the Conference of Parties for Climate Change, think Paris and Copenhagen and Rio. That's very important, obviously. This convention or this international effort to find agreement on biodiversity is complementary to all that climate change leadership. And we're really excited that California is going to play an active role. Last point I'll make is we're very excited to be currently recruiting for two important first-time positions at our Natural Resources Agency. One is an Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs to institutionalize greater consultation, government-to-government consultation within our agency, and importantly, to identify and execute opportunities for co-management of resources between tribal and state governments. And then the other position, again, for the first time, is an Assistant Secretary for Equity and Environmental Justice to institutionalize those principles and those priorities across our agency, building on the good work that so many of our departments have already done, and frankly, building on the legacy of our sister agency, California Environmental Protection Agency, which has had this position for, I think, almost a decade. That's helped build up a really robust EJ program within Cal EPA. So excited to turn the page on 2020, as I know we all are. both because of its challenges this year, but because there's so much good to come in the new year. So thanks for the opportunity to update, Kate.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. Great updates and congratulations on those two exciting new positions. I have Secretary Blumenfeld and Secretary Kim with their hands up. Secretary Blumenfeld.
Thank you, Chair Gordon, and also warm welcome to Chancellor Munoz. We're really great to have you there, and huge amount of activities happening at UC Merced, and really can't wait to engage you on everything from air quality to a lot of the research that's happening on sustainable communities. So super excited. Talking of new folks, new announcements, the governor appointed Leanne Randolph last week to chair the Air Resources Board, and really excited to have Leanne step into that role. At the same time, Mary has had Nichols an incredible legacy. I can't think of really any other person in California who's done more to reduce air pollution and tackle climate change, and really want to say a big thank you to Mary in the SGC context. We also are lucky to really bring a lot of change to that board. So we have 4 other appointments that were made at the same time as Leanne. Davina Hurt is going to represent the Bay Area Air District. Gideon Krakow is going to represent the South Coast AQMD. Tanya Pacheco Warner, who I think lives, Chancellor, in Merced, represents the San Joaquin Valley, and John Barnes, Dr. Barnes is the physician. So really excited about those appointments that the governor made. In addition, we've seen in the last few days, today, Michael Reagan, and yesterday, Gina McCarthy, and Brenda. Brenda's a good friend, but I'm forgetting her name at the moment, to head CEQ.
Mallory, yeah.
Brenda Mallory, yeah. Brenda, who was at US EPA when I was there, is going to be the head of CEQ. So a whole new slate and a whole set of, as well as Deb Haaland, the new head of Department of Interior, I think was named today. So really exciting new chapter as it relates to sustainable communities and the agenda of SGC, and looking forward to working with this group and hopefully being able to forge a new course where we're not constantly battling the federal government, but actually getting to work with them on sustainable communities and the agenda of the SGC. So lots of stuff happening, lots of excitement. The final thing that I'd say to remind us all and ground us that, you know, the wildfire season is hopefully nearing its end, but the teams from OES and Cal Recycle started the cleanup of this year's wildfire season on December 1st, which really spreads from the border with Mexico to the Oregon border. So it's a very spread out, disparate, complex cleanup operation, and I'll continue to give updates on that as we move forward. So that concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Blumenfeld. And I will add to your federal list Jennifer Granholm at Department of Energy, who also has a real history of thinking about these issues in a very integrated way with a real eye to kind of what it takes to do a transition. So I think she will be a real benefit to us as well. I have Secretary Kim and then Secretary Castro-Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair Gordon. I don't have an update since we met just a few weeks ago, but I simply wanted to welcome Chancellor Munoz to the council. Chancellor, it's great to have you. And you'll be glad to know that my nephew is a junior at UC Merced. He absolutely loves it. I've been to your campus once before. Impressive place. So welcome, and looking forward to working with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me know if he has any parking tickets.
No, don't do that. Don't even let him know. That is great. Thank you. I didn't know that, David. So that's good to know. Secretary Castro-Ramirez.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just wanted also to welcome Chancellor Munoz. It's so great to have you on this council. It's so great to have you back in California. And I just wanted to add one more thing to the list of expertise and work that the Chancellor has done in the space of housing. He served on the Texas Housing and Community Development Allocation Board or Commission, and that's basically where the Chancellor and I reconnected. I was, in San Antonio. We had taken a bus full of public housing residents up to the to Austin, to the Capitol, advocating for tax credits for an affordable housing development. And lo and behold, we walk into the chambers and there's, Dr. Munoz at the dais and a champion for affordable housing. And so, glad that you're back in California and that you're serving on the council. So welcome.
Thank you. She forgot to mention successfully advocating on behalf of her constituents.
Yeah, it was, well, we'll have to share that story at some point, but it was not an easy, by any means, an easy thing to do. But again, bienvenido. We're happy to have you here. Just a few things on the housing front. I'll just share, I think during the last report, I mentioned that the administration is continuing to do a lot of really good work in terms of collaborating and coordinating the various housing entities across the state. We've made really tremendous progress. Taking a step back, looking at what the system is producing and what it's not producing, and also helping to establish a set of housing principles that not only sort of will guide the work of producing more affordable housing, but also embedding in our work an equity and inclusion lens. And then also, very importantly, working very closely with our partners in the Treasurer's Office and ensuring that there's greater alignment in terms of bond cap and tax credit allocation. So just, I think that the team has come a very long way. I just want to thank Luis for being also very involved and engaged with us on that effort. And I think more to come in 2021. And speaking of the Treasurer's Office, the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, the Board of Directors, will be meeting on Monday, the 21st, to discuss the 2021 regulations. And these are the regulations that basically will guide the priorities for the bond cap allocation for 2021, and just really pleased to see that there's been a lot of good progress in terms of adopting the governor's priorities in this space, and so they will be voting on those regulations on Monday, but they do reflect the priorities that we all have been working on. The other item that the board will be considering on Monday is a consideration to award $600 million in bond cap that has been returned from the high-speed rail project of, I think, 2019. The other sort of important piece and positive piece to this is that the discussions have been thus far that these dollars will be, or it's not dollars, but this bond cap, the 600 million, will be prioritized for affordable housing developments that did not receive funding in the last round, and also with a priority on the hardest hit sort of communities. And so there's a criteria for looking at the type of development, whether they serve very low income, and so anyhow, very encouraged to see that there's going to be an infusion of additional resources to support the expansion of affordable housing. The third, a very brief update. I think I mentioned that during one of our meetings that our agency is responsible for the implementation of AB 3088, which is, was signed by the governor in, I think it was September the 1st, and it was, basically affords tenants and renters protections from evictions, and then provides also relief to small landlords. The first phase of the implementation was very much focused on providing resources and support to ensure that tenants and landlords were availing themselves of these protections. The second phase was having the agency lead a robust stakeholder engagement process to help prioritize future federal dollars to help keep families housed. Of course, many of us know that there seems to be positive traction at the congressional level in terms of a stimulus package. We're monitoring that very carefully and closely. We're very encouraged to see that the stimulus package includes about $25 billion for rental assistance. And so there's been sort of a lot of work with stakeholder engagement in terms of how to prioritize those future dollars should Congress succeed in passing this bill. We're estimating that about $1.5 billion in rental assistance come to the state. And so very much, we're using the stakeholder engagement process to help prioritize how those dollars would be allocated. And then just to conclude, the Home Key initiative, which was introduced by Governor Newsom earlier in the year as a response, to the COVID pandemic and the impact on vulnerable populations, individuals experiencing homelessness. We're very excited that local communities are doing really a phenomenal job with implementing the Home Key initiative. We, through the Housing and Community Development Department, awarded $845 million to 48 different jurisdictions, 94 projects in total that will produce just over 6,000 permanent housing units. The Home Key model, I think, as you all know, is based on converting motel, hotel, or vacant buildings into permanent housing. The speed at which HCD and also local government or local entities that are recipients of these dollars have been able to close escrow and make these units available. It's really impressive. And so we're just really thankful for the partnership and really the innovation and just of course, much kudos and thanks goes to our governor for having the vision and the foresight to help push that project forward. And with that concludes my report. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Such amazing work across the board, and just really appreciate everything your office has done. I don't have other hands, but wanted to see if either Secretary Ross or Nicole wanted to. Yep, Secretary Ross, hand is up. Go ahead.
For some reason, the raise hand function is not active on mine. Honestly, I've looked and looked and looked.
No, I think that's true for Secretary Castro Ramirez too. So you guys can just
welcome, Chancellor. I just wanted to say how eager I am to work with you and the great faculty that you have on the Fresno-Merced Future of Food Innovation Corridor. We had a great state board meeting yesterday, and Kate, thank you so much for speaking. It was really a great agenda. Western Growers presented an update on their innovation center in the Salinas Valley. They have just brought on someone with very deep experience in Silicon Valley with startups, who happens to be from a 5th generation farming family in Monterey County. And I brought up UC Merced as a great place for them to be partnering with. And it just underscores the importance of this season and the work that we've done this year when we saw a 73% increase in demand at our food banks. And that our farmers and ranchers lost a lot of markets in that sudden disruption, but we were able to pivot and direct that food into food banks. As of the end of November, over 155 million pounds of fresh produce, which really changes what's in that food box, along with 43 million pounds of shelf-stable food. So the importance of food security and what we're doing with these investments in the Sustainable Ag Land Conservation Program really are about long-term sustainability, food security, and climate solutions. So great to meet you. Thank you for serving.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Secretary Ross. And Nicole, did you have anything this morning? You want to jump in? All right. And David, did you want to say something else? I saw a hand.
Yes, thanks. Just wanted to piggyback onto Secretary Castro Ramirez, and she had mentioned that a bond allocation was returned to iBank. from high-speed rail. True, it is from high-speed rail, but not the California high-speed rail project, but the proposed Express West Bright Line privately funded project from Las Vegas to Victorville. Just wanted to clarify in case there was some misunderstanding that the project would have taken from the California high-speed rail project, which is not the case. So just wanted to pass it on.
Thank you. That's
Thanks.
actually really helpful.
Thank you, Secretary. Yes.
Thank you. All right, we are going to move to Executive Director report. Let me just say the thing I meant to say and will say now, which is just a congratulations, particularly to the California Energy Commission, which is of course a part of resources, but to the whole state and all of us for California ranking #1 by the as the #1 in the 2020 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard, which is an ACEEE scorecard. They're sort of the experts on this, and I just think it's a great testament. Energy efficiency is one of those things that doesn't get talked about as much sometimes because it's they're not shiny solar panels, but it's incredibly important for California residents, for saving money, for creating jobs, for creating a healthier building environment across the state. And the state's been working on this for 4 decades and really has shown itself to be a leader. So just congratulations to everybody, because every one of the agencies and individuals and local and regional groups represented here has been involved in that effort. So thank you, everybody. All right, we are going to move to the Executive Director report. Louise.
Great, thank you. Thank you everybody for being here. It does, I know these were 2 meetings in close succession, so appreciate everybody joining us again today. And I have a very short update because we did just meet. So next slide, please, Fabiha. I did want to give a couple of staffing updates. First, we did add an additional staff person to our TCC team, which is going to help with implementation now that we have 3 rounds of grants in implementation mode. And we actually just signed yesterday our first grant agreement for round 3. And so Oakland has moved into implementation, and that's in less than 6 months from award. So we're really excited at how rapidly we were able to get that going and get that work underway. And so really excited to have Jerry Rivero joining that team. He's coming to us from San Diego, Nicole. So maybe, you guys are zooming in from San Diego, but we look forward to when we get to welcome him up in Sacramento, but just really excited to have him on board. And then I am very sad to say that we are losing our esteemed counsel, Doug Bojack, to the state water boards, where he's going to be working in their financial assistance programs. And I just want to take a minute to thank Doug for everything he's done. He is actually the first person to be a dedicated counsel to SGC and really has helped us craft that role and been just instrumental in helping us build really complex grant agreements like those we do for TCC, working on all of our interagency partnerships that we have with many departments who help us and support us in doing our work, and is just generally a wonderful colleague and friend to a lot of us. So we're really going to miss Doug. Excited that he's not going far. A huge gain for the water boards, and we wish him all the best. So just want to say thank you to Doug. And then we are adding staff to we're replacing one of our positions on our high-speed rail partnership to really help support station area planning and really integrating smart land use conservation development into the high-speed rail project, and also a senior administrator at SGC. And we will add to this list also a council. So folks know people who are looking to work with SGC, we would welcome references and recommendations. The only other update I have, next slide, please, is I just wanted to let everybody know where we are and thinking through from the last council meeting, the guidelines for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program. I think at the last council meeting, we had a really robust discussion, had delayed adoption because of the pending SIDLAC regulations. I think that's given us a really excellent opportunity, though, to dig in on some of our larger issues as we think about geographic distribution of awards, the climate change goals of the program. And so we are working now at a staff level to really look at trends over especially the program in its entirety, but really the last 3 rounds, which are the most similar rounds to one another, to take a look at what trends and scores have looked like across geographies, the disadvantaged community distributions of those projects and awards, and then also looking at this in the context of housing need and both housing pressure and population growth. And so really trying to take that step back to look at the multiple goals that AHSC is trying to accomplish and working with the data to understand that. And so we really are focusing on that geographic distribution scores and this broader relationship to program goals. Next slide, please, Fabiha. We will going through that process, make amendments to the guidelines and release another draft for a 10-day public comment period with a focus again on geographic targets and score thresholds, but also another really important conversation that has arisen and when was discussed at that council meeting was incentives for all electric construction, including consideration of combustion appliances. And so with that, our plan is to bring the guidelines back to the council in February. Next slide. So the last thing I just wanted to do was take a minute to thank all of you guys, all of our council members for everything you've done this year. We had an incredible year. You've transitioned to a remote meeting environment with us and appreciate everybody's patience in helping us do that. But even while we did that, we were able to award over $650 million to support communities all around California. This is over 2,500 housing units, including the first ever tribal housing project in AHSC and our first combined TCC AHSC award. We also were able to develop and adopt technical assistance guidelines, and then reiterate our commitment to those TA partnerships. And then finally, I think historically, the adoption of the racial equity resolution, which all of your staff is now working on how we implement that. And it's been wonderful conversation, wonderful partnerships. So just really want to say thank you to all of you. The next slide. So this is from all of us at SGC to say thank you. I hope you all have a restful holiday. We're all looking forward to 2021, but appreciate everything you've done to support SGC. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or we can move on.
Thanks so much, Louise. I just a quick preview. I know we have one public comment on this item. I also wanted to give a heads up on a change in the agenda order from the original agenda sent out. But first, are there any council member questions for Louise or discussion points before we get to that public comment? I'm looking at you all. I'm not. Oh, Wade, go ahead.
Louise, I just wanted to compliment your team and the staff that you've built. About 3 jobs ago, I served in the Office of Planning and Research when SGC had a director and literally 1.5 colleagues. And it's remarkable the growth that you've been able to facilitate. And of course, before you, Randa Winston and so many others. And SGC is just a leader in so many ways, whether it's the provision of technical support to enable more communities to access state funds, or all the work you're doing on racial and ethnic justice and inclusion. So I'm just excited, and it's really energizing to see that photo or that set of photos and just see how big SGC has become.
Thank you. Thanks, Secretary Cofer. That was really well said. Really appreciate that. Any other council member? I think we all join in that sentiment.
I want to say ditto to what I was trying to jump in there to give.
Well, and what we can't show, I should admit and acknowledge, of course, are all of our partners. So our partners at HCD, Department of Conservation, who help to administer our programs. And I often, when people ask how big we are, I say we look small, but we reach out. And without those partners, we couldn't do the work that we do. So thank you to them as well.
Thanks so much, Louise, and everybody at SGC, and particularly Doug, who does a lot behind the scenes. You see him at these meetings as the roll caller, an occasional legal expert, but he really has been just foundational. So we really will miss you, Doug, although at least you're staying in the water board world and with the state, and we will continue relying on you. With that, I want to go to the public comment for this item, Sandra.
Thanks, Kate. We do have one public comment card on this item from Hassan Ikrada. So Hassan, we're going to unmute you and you can go ahead and make your comment in 1 second. And if there's anybody else who wanted to comment specifically on the executive director's report, go ahead and raise your hand using the raise hand function in Zoom, or press *9 if you're on the phone, and we'll watch for you. And I'll call your name if you do raise your hand. Go ahead, Hassan.
Thank you, Sandra. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, members. Good to see you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you for a couple of minutes. My name is Hassan Ikrata. I'm the CEO of SANDAG, San Diego Association of Government. We are in the process of developing what I believe is a transformational regional plan that will create an efficient, equitable transportation system. Our goal is to meet and surpass the greenhouse gas emission target required by the state of California. The Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant Program provide vital funds for housing development and transportation improvements. But many regions, including San Diego, have difficulty competing for these funds and are unable to construct affordable housing near transit. I was pleased to hear the Strategic Growth Council is considering geographic distribution goal for the program. However, the requirements for that goal should be achievable. And I appreciate what the Executive Director Luis said, and I appreciate all of you. And I sound like a broken record here. For many, many years now, I've been saying, urging that you look at the whole state and make sure every region in the state can compete, because we're talking about changing the trajectory of where we're going, transportation and housing. So I urge you again to consider the needs of all regions before you adopt the guidelines next year. Putting a target that allow people to compete, but also need to allow people to achieve. And I have faith that you're going to do that. And your chairwoman, Kate Gordon, knows this. And I have faith in her, and the rest of you, our public member from San Diego, Capretz, knows this too. We want to do the right thing. Help us do those things with a guideline that consider regions like San Diego and regions that are not fully urbanly developed. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak for a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Hassan, for those comments. Really appreciate it. And I think many of us have seen your presentation of the SANDAG vision for your region, and just appreciate the work you're doing on the ground there as well. Sandra, do we have any other comments on this item?
I see no additional comments.
Great. So let me just say really quickly before we move on that we did do a slight change to the agenda to make sure that council members were here in person for different pieces. We will be going to item 6, which is the consent calendar on the Catalyst Fund next, and then we will be going actually to the action item of the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program right after that as agenda item 7. And then the update on replan will become agenda item 8. So just wanted to give everybody that update. With that, we'll turn to the Catalyst Fund. And I just wanted to say a word on this because the timing on this is a little bit complicated, and I just want to explain it. So many people who are on this council were involved in a very comprehensive interagency effort last year with the January budget in 2020, which it feels like it was like 5 years ago, to develop a comprehensive climate budget, including this idea of a catalyst fund that would be available to help to really catalyze private investment into some of the core priorities of the administration and the legislature to accomplish our climate commitments. The Catalyst Fund, unfortunately, was never capitalized because of the impact that COVID had on our state budget. And so there was never any funding put into it. The vehicle itself, the legislature did implement the vehicle itself through AB 78, but did not ever capitalize it. And so one of the complicated things is that AB 78 calls on the Strategic Growth Council in consultation with the Labor Workforce Development Board to make recommendations on areas that make sense for a catalyst fund type mechanism to be implemented, and ideally to make recommendations on types of projects. However, because the fund is not capitalized, it's a little bit, we're required to have that set of recommendations. However, I just want to remind everybody there isn't currently any money in the fund. So, so what we have is sort of a action on today's calendar as a consent item, as a continued commitment to leveraging the fund generally to advance the administration's and legislature's existing climate priorities without talking specifically about exactly what it would fund, given that it doesn't have any funding in it. And that conversation is sort of not yet baked. So I hope that makes sense to folks. In the event it's capitalized in this budget, in the event funding is put into the Catalyst Fund in this budget coming up, we will loop back on this, and the council will engage in discussions with Labor Workforce Development Board as required by statute to talk about those fund categories and refine that conversation. But what we're having today is really a high level conversation. And so I just wanted to give that context and then turn it back, I think, to Louise and then to Dan Adler. Is that correct?
Yeah, and actually you really, excuse me, covered what I was going to cover much better than I could have. So with that introduction, what I would like to do is turn it over to Dan Adler, who is the Senior Advisor for Climate Finance at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, to walk through a little background on the Catalyst Fund and then the investment categories that they are looking at right now. So Dan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you, Chair Gordon. Thanks all of you for the chance to be with you today to talk at a high level about a fund that exists in concept but has no resources. So it is an interesting dynamic. But what I thought I would do, and I think we have a few slides to share, is just describe the work we have been doing since I joined the team mid-year to try and shape the fund and an associated program around it, anticipating success of receiving funding from a range of different sources, which, as I think many of you know, was the intent. This is meant to be a highly leveraged vehicle for public-private funding partnerships that delivers on the full range of the state's infrastructure and climate and inclusivity goals. So we need to build the program, and we expect we'll have a chance to raise some money into it. So this is just a summary statement. We can probably skip over it, but we want to accelerate climate progress and really position sustainability and sustainable industries as the leading edge of growth and economic opportunity in the state going forward. So let's move to the next one. And there are 3 pillars. I think you might need to kind of click through to make them appear. Thank you. Cultivating private partnerships. We know that in order to do this work well, in addition to the capital piece, we need to understand all the way down to the ground where these industries are, and crucially where the communities are that support these projects, what they're wrestling with, how the state can be a partner, maybe at a minimum how the state can get out of the way. But there are a lot of rules, regulations, some incentives, some constraints that we are asking our private partners, including community and NGO groups, to navigate. So helping them do that is crucial to the success. This component is an element that will continue to sit at GoBiz and hopefully grow, whereas the second piece, the notion of mobilizing capital, is the fund that sits at iBank. It is established, it is designed to be flexible, it can receive a range of different funds. The intent is to do things the markets are not doing, so we don't want to just be another investment vehicle that charges too much and won't take on the projects and the counterparties, the borrowers that we know we need to support. It is meant to be a revolver. We'll redeploy the money and hopefully ramp up the engagement of private capital, because the core thesis is there'll never be enough public money to do everything we need to do on climate in the next decade and then beyond. The third piece behind the scenes is the sort of the crosscut, making sure that all the government actors, all the state agencies that have an interest in a policy agenda relevant to climate are talking together, are hearing from the market actors, are hearing from the partners they need on the ground, and are aligning their incentives and hopefully improving the regulatory landscape through that shared learning exercise. This includes not just the state-to-state work, but state-to-local partnerships, obviously crucial to getting projects done, and getting projects done in communities that we're not serving as well as we might. And then ideally, going forward, more of a partnership at the federal level. So all things related to good government is the third pillar of the Catalyst program. Let's go to the last slide here. So since we had the chance to do a little bit more sort of market research and engagement after the January announcement of the Catalyst program, and then in the down period, if there is ever one, where we didn't have resources, we put out a shingle and said, this is the thesis, this is how we want to engage. We want to hear from market actors and development groups, local partners, and really service all 58 counties and make, again, this a vehicle for inclusion and shared benefits of the climate future. We articulated some sector theses, the places we know we needed to do some finance and sort of market development work. Those are on the left here. But we very quickly developed an amazing list of investable opportunities, north of $6 billion. It's growing, more than 700 projects, again, throughout California, many of which I would consider sort of shovel-ready, shovel-worthy from a stimulus and economic recovery perspective. So this list, this running list of investment partnership opportunities is extremely useful in the federal conversation in particular, and as well as any state-based incentives for recovery that we might see coming in the months ahead. So that's a little snapshot of the catalyst. I don't want to take too much time here, but as we transition into the memo that is in your meeting materials that describes kind of in rough senses where we think the fund could go in the next year, as Chair Gordon mentioned, and as Louise will mention as well, it's necessarily in draft. We're trying to be, number one, responsive to the executive orders that are outlining climate priorities. But we are also aware that there are more and more opportunities in our agency partnerships to find resources and mobilize them for critical market segments and climate objectives going forward. So, right now the thesis and the immediate opportunity is around ZEB infrastructure. We also believe there's important work to do in forest biomass utilization for wildfire risk reduction. We want to advance the executive order around institutional investors in the state. Per STRS and UC, they have made great commitments to moving money into sustainable infrastructure. Can this vehicle be a conduit to help them get access to those opportunities? And then lastly, obviously, it's important to partner federally where we can. So these are areas where we see immediate opportunity. There may be some emerging things to do in climate smart agriculture. But again, it's all in draft as we enter this budget conversation. And the last thing I would say is this is a tremendously important set of relationships with SGC and with workforce that we're committed to, both at GoBiz and iBank, really cementing and helping drive the strategy going forward. So while we can't tell you exactly where it's heading in the next year, we hope that we have a chance to come back and share what we're seeing, both in terms of inbound investment resources and near-term investment opportunities, as soon as it makes sense for you and your agenda. I welcome any questions or comments now, but please know that the Catalyst team, such as it is, it's more than just me, but not by a lot. We're at your service when and if the time comes.
Thank you so much, Dan, and great job presenting on something that is real in form and not yet in function. I will say that your point about the federal opportunity is well taken. One, just for context reason, that the legislature moved forward on creating the fund even without it having capital is that there is a parallel discussion going on at the federal level about the potential of a green bank strategy, and that type of funding would only flow to the states that have a vehicle available for it. So the theory was, let's make sure the vehicle exists. So there's a lot of movement on the theory of this, though again, not yet capitalized. So this is a consent item because it isn't an actual set of specific recommendations, just a following the statute. Again, a commitment, it sounds like, to come back with more specific recommendations. When, I'm going to say when rather than if and when the fund has some money in it. Are there questions generally about the fund for Dan, or comments from anyone on the council? I'm seeing Nicole. Go ahead.
Oh, just a question. I think it sounds awesome. So you identified projects. Where did they come from? Just out of curiosity.
How did we gather the intel about what was possible?
Yeah, intel, or yeah.
Yeah, two really kind of high-level sources of that intel. Number one was the interagency process that Chair Gordon mentioned that sort of teed all this off, was agencies hearing about on-the-ground opportunities, kind of fed that into a database that we then called and tried to put some numbers around. That was the early list. And then secondly, just engaging in the market. The iBank does a lot of current work with borrowers, with intermediaries, and just the network effect of saying, here's a new vehicle that might support your ambitions. What do you have? Just really a flood of inbound information into the iBank's communications department that was a little overwhelming at first, but quite inspiring.
Okay, cool. And I see that you said there's going to be technical assistance. How do you see that working on the ground?
So that's an interesting component. So right now, the the team at GoBiz that handles ZEVs, the ZEV market development work, is sort of a model that we'd like to see replicated across other climate infrastructure sectors. They're doing things like a permit Olympics, where they help local communities streamline the permitting for ZEV infrastructure, kind of get a playbook for how to do it right and move the industry faster. So that's like a good example of the sorts of things we'd like to replicate across the ground. It's not just here's money, but here's money and kind of a set of use cases, how to deploy it to achieve your objectives.
Okay, that's great. I'd met with Sandag, and I'm sure Hassan already left, but thank you, Hassan, for coming online and championing San Diego. I've decided not to speak up today and be more calm, not debate Jared every meeting. So San Diego, for example, just so you know, and I'm sure you do know, I guess we have 45,000 EVs, but to meet the governor's executive order, we need 450,000 on the road by 2030. So clearly we need a massive investment in EV charging infrastructure. And I'm sure just helping finance purchase of EVs, everything. I mean, you know the market, I'm sure, way better than I do. But yeah, it's super exciting that you guys are getting ready for that. Because I was pretty shocked by that. I was like, oh, that's a huge undertaking to get that many EVs on the road.
Yeah, it's a big lift. We have a role to play, but there's a lot of other agencies across all levels of government, civil society that do as well. But no, it's helping to sharpen our thinking, seeing a goal like that put forward.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Great points, and a good reminder of that gap between what government is able to do, especially in these constrained budget times, and what is necessary to do. Secretary Blumenfeld.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate all the work that's going into this. And I think, to your point, priming the pump so that when we get funding, the projects, everyone always wants shovel ready, and coming up with $6 billion and 700 projects. Really appreciate all your leadership on this. I guess the question is, if we were going to do a scan of these projects that have come in the door, how would you think about reorienting them or orienting them with an equity or environmental justice lens? Namely, of those 6 billion, like what would the narrative and portfolio of projects that really help enhance communities and promote equity look like?
That's a great question, and I have my perspective, but many other perspectives need to be brought to bear on how to address that. But at the kind of investment level, if we have this scarce resources, which is incredibly cheap capital that is designed to take new and different risks, the risks that matter the most, I think, in the long run, one would be to promote technologies that are not kind of currently financeable. So find the technology edge and push it, and find the inclusivity edge and push on that. And ideally, you can do both at once. Some of the most compelling opportunities that I've seen and feel tractable to me would be in the heavy duty goods movement space in and out around ports, where we have both huge climate effects and material local environmental justice problems. But the technology is mature or near mature, so this is the nudge to go and get that done. I don't believe that it is a long run or even a medium run commitment to the kind of present portfolio of technologies. We need to use what we have now, but be mindful that these scarce capital and human resources need to drive the technology agenda ASAP and spread the benefits as widely as possible, not just for climate and environmental justice, but for economic development and the political strength that builds for our movement, making people see these outcomes benefiting them, that they can turn back to the political process and demand more.
I'd love to spend some time maybe in the new year just understanding, maybe come over and we can sit with the CARB folks just on the goods movement slice. If there was a goods movement slice, like how we'd approach it and how that could be catalyzed maybe through private sector and other funding in parallel, so that we're kind of merging those streams.
Welcome the chance. It's very much on our minds.
Cool.
Thanks. Great question. And I think gets again to the kind of we're slightly off on timing issue, where there will need to be a set of guidelines put together for the fund once it's capitalized. So I think that goes to that process, and that's something that I'm hoping that we will be very involved in, given that we're called out in the statute as a key player. Do we have any other comments from council members? Do we have any public comments on this item, Sandra?
I don't have any comment cards for this item, but I did want to say if there's anyone who wanted to comment on this item, to raise your hand by using the raise hand function in Zoom or pressing *9 at this time. So let's just give a moment for that.
Secretary Crowfoot just put his hand up. So while we're waiting for that, we will go to him.
I would just say Godspeed on this effort. We know that we need more resources to make the scale and speed of change that's necessary to combat the climate crisis. I think California state government has stepped up in an amazing way on this with its investments, but we need more. So no pressure, Dan and company, but really excited to see this get off the ground and start to work, and then to be able to scale it up over time.
Thank you, Secretary. Looks like we have two. I'm sorry, Secretary Lourdes, Castro Ramirez, were you trying to raise your hand or just shifting? Okay. I think we have two comments, public comments now. Go ahead, Sandra.
Yes.
And I should say we are limiting those to 2 minutes apiece, and you do have a timer on your screen. Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you, Kate. First one is going to be from Eddie Price. And Eddie, I think Michael's unmuting you right now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Eddie Price, and I'm the CEO and president of the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition. And we're working with some developers on a ground up project called the San Diego Energy Equity Campus. And I was wondering if there's any assistance or capacity assistance from from your organization or entity. I've been listening to this conversation all day. Well, not all day, but since you've been on. And, you know, the Energy Campus is designed to assist organizations like yours with moving these conversations and opportunities throughout communities of concern. Communities of concern is the new terminology for disadvantaged communities, I might add. So I was just wondering if, you know, if we can have an offline conversation about possible capacity building or opportunity building offline.
Thanks so much, Eddie. Dan, is that something that you'd be willing to follow up on? It sounds like an important conversation, going to Secretary Blumenfeld's point, and just in general conversations I know you've been having on equity overlay to the fund and to the work at iBank.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome that opportunity, and it's core to one of the 3 pillars of the Catalyst program and the work at GoBiz. It's related to finding incentives, finding support within state government for efforts like this. So I would definitely welcome the chance. I'm not sure how best to stay in touch. If there's a way to share my email, I would certainly do it.
Sandra just luckily told me what I should say here, which is, Sandra, Eddie, Sandra's going to reach out to you in Q&A, and then if you email her, then she'll connect you with Dan.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then we have one more comment, I believe.
We do. That's from Daniel Talent. And Michael will unmute your microphone, Daniel.
Hi, guys. This is Daniel Tyland from the Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. And I simply had a question on the fund. If there are any non-financial resources that the fund could provide, irrespective of whether or not it's capitalized. And one of those might be, for example, financial guarantees that could be provided for the private sector that's willing to make any such investments. Is that available within this fund, and are there things that can be done without capitalization?
Thanks, Daniel. I'll leave that to Dan, though I do know the fund is looking at loan guarantees, isn't that right, Dan? But I think it still has to be capitalized to do that. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. So the loan guarantee, the broad portfolio credit support to induce private lending is core to the strategy, and arguably more important than a direct loan because you're guaranteed private multiples on that. But it is not free. There needs to be a capital base in order to do that. But I would say that iBank does that work now in its small business lending center, and has a network of CDFIs that it supports through credit guarantees along those lines. So the Catalyst Fund for this large scale infrastructure push is not capitalized for that purpose, but the iBank in its present business might be of some interest.
Great, thank you.
Another place to do a connection through the Q&A. And then Public Member Capritz, I have your hand up, and I didn't know if that was a new question.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's not a new question. I just wanted to give a shout out to Eddie Price, who just spoke up, because he's one of the recipients of the California Energy Commission Energy Legends Award, or I don't know what you were called, Eddie, hero, legend. I don't know. He's truly changed the game in San Diego, and we're great friends, and he's been a really fun and inspiring partner. And I just wanted to let everybody know in the state of California that you just got to hear from one of the people that was honored. I think it's the first ever awards. So I'm really proud of you, Eddie, and congrats. And I can't wait to help you with your Equity Center.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Congratulations. Yeah, that is a great thank you, Nicole, for that. And thank you, Eddie, for all the work you're doing. It sounded amazing. It clearly is amazing. And looking forward to hearing more about it. I don't think we have other hands and we don't have other comments. And so one of the things Doug Bojack has taught me in my time is that when it's a consent item, we don't have to have a vote. So I now understand that, and we will not have a vote. But thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Dan, for your time and for the work you've been putting into this. We will come back on this item for sure. So really appreciate it. I think we need a minute to switch PowerPoints. Is that right, Fabiha? Are we? Oh, look at you. You're just on it. All right. Moving to the next item on the calendar, which, as I said, it was switched out and is now the big action item of this meeting, which is the fiscal year 2019-2020 Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program Awards, otherwise known as SALC. Louise, did you want to give any upfront comments on this? I mean, I'll just say I love this meeting because I love the SALC program. I think my staff is incredibly sick of me saying, oh, shoot, now I'm hearing that we do have to vote. Do we have to vote, Doug? I'm sorry. You told me last time we didn't.
Yes. Unfortunately, we do have to go through a quick vote here. We have
Last time we did a consent item, you were like, you don't need to vote. So now you are confusing me. But that's all right. I am often wrong. All right. Excuse me for being wrong and saying something that was probably legally incorrect to this whole group of people. And you should listen to Doug because he knows what he's talking about. All right, going back a minute to the prior item on the Catalyst Fund.
Yes, we have a recommended action here included in the meeting materials, where the recommended action is to accept those interim investment category recommendations from the iBank for the Climate Catalyst Fund.
I'd like to move the item. Or do we just vote?
We would move and second and vote.
Okay, move the item.
I'll second.
Great, and I'll call a vote here. Chair Gordon?
Aye.
Secretary Blumenfeld?
Aye.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Aye.
Secretary Crowfoot?
Aye.
Secretary Kim? Or I see Deputy Secretary Musavi here.
Aye.
Secretary Ross?
Aye.
Councilmember Capritz?
Aye.
And Councilmember Munoz?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And I now remember that what Doug told me is we don't have to have discussion on consent items, but we do have to vote on them. So I apologize for maligning my fabulous SGC colleague, Doug, and being wrong about what he told me. He gives only the best legal advice, and the water boards are lucky to have him. Moving on now to the next item, again, the SALC program. And I was just saying really briefly that I love this item, and the reason that and again, I think everyone's sick of me saying that that land conservation is really the other side of the coin to the other thing that OPR works on the most, which is compact infill development and sustainable, kind of infill. So really appreciate the fact that we work on both here at SGC. And with that, Louise, I don't know if you have intro comments before we get to Virginia.
Yeah, I would just remind everyone, yes, this is funded through the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, really in recognition of that interconnection. But yeah, I will turn it over to Virginia, who will walk through the award recommendations for this round.
Great, thank you, Louise. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the council. My name is Virginia Jameson. I'm a Climate and Conservation Program Manager at the Department of Conservation, which administers the SALC program on behalf of SGC. I'm here today to report to you on staff's recommendations for Round 6 program awards. Next slide, please. My presentation today will consist of a brief overview of the program background and goals, the staff recommendation, details on the recommended projects, and next steps. Next slide. So first I will start with an overview. Next slide. The principal goal of the SALC program is to keep farmland in agriculture and to further the purposes of climate legislation, including AB 32, SB 375, and the state's carbon neutrality goals by avoiding increases in the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the conversion of California's ag land to development. As Luis mentioned, SALC is a component of the AHSC and is intended to support efforts to encourage infill. The guidelines prioritize projects that protect lands most at risk of development and promote agricultural sustainability. Next slide. So there are 2 eligible project types available through SALC, planning and acquisitions. The first type is planning grants, which are given to local governments to develop and implement plans for the protection of agricultural lands at risk of conversion to other uses. Next slide. The second type is acquisition grants, which are used to protect agricultural lands through the acquisition of voluntary permanent agricultural conservation easements or through the outright purchase of property, which is also known as fee title acquisition. Next slide. So the program also offers many additional co-benefits, some of which Secretary Crowfoot mentioned earlier. These include maintaining buffers between communities and fire-prone areas, ensuring productive land for future food production, and protecting habitat and open space. The program also keeps land available for carbon sequestration activities. Next slide. Over the past 5 rounds, the SALC program has awarded $180.9 million and entered into grant agreements for the protection of over 100,000 acres of farm and ranch land in California, as well as awarded 14 planning grants. Through our technical assistance provider, we've also been able to provide application and project implementation assistance to 3 local governments. Next slide. The program operates on a yearly cycle, and this was the 6th round of the program. We had the most competitive round to date this year, receiving twice the number of planning applications and 50% more acquisition project applications than last year. We are recommending today funding 10 planning grants, 2 fee title acquisitions, and 20 easements. Next slide, please. So I want to discuss funding for a minute. The program has been allocated a total of approximately $213 million to date, and that includes $38 million in fiscal year 1920 auction proceeds for round 6. The program has approximately $34 million in rollover funding available due to projects that either dropped out or came in under budget, and staff proposed to use approximately $14 million of that to supplement the funding availability this round to keep it commensurate with last year. Our goal is to ensure sufficient funding at a level that staff can successfully administer. So that would leave about $20 million in rollover funding for next year, and we anticipate having plenty of projects, both as a result of the current suite of planning grants, as well as great projects that weren't quite ready this year that we anticipate seeing again. And also we anticipate SALC being used as a tool to pursue and implement Executive Order N8220. So we want to make sure that we have funds available for that. Next slide, please. So that brings me to the recommended action before you today, which is to approve staff's recommendation to award $52,046,171 in fiscal year 1920 greenhouse gas reduction funds to support the acquisition of 20 easements, 2 fee title acquisitions, and 10 planning grants. Next slide. So here are the subtotals for the different project types. For those planning grants, $2.37 million and approximately $43.8 million for the 20 conservation easement grants, and then $5.8 million for the 2 fee title projects. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you details on all the different project types, and I'll start with the recommended planning grant awards. AHSC's enabling statute authorizes planning grants to support the implementation of sustainable community strategies or other plans that support greenhouse gas reductions and that promote infill and compact development. Eligible applicants for planning grants are cities, counties, LAFCOs, municipal planning organizations, and councils of government. To propose projects that support the long-term viability and protection of agricultural land and that designate a set of implementation measures to achieve those objectives. Next slide, please. One thing I want to highlight this year is that we really emphasized technical assistance in our planning leading up to this round, and it was really successful. Last year, SGC dedicated $200,000 to a technical assistance contract, which was awarded to an entity called Cultivate LLC. And then in 2019, Cultivate and DOC staff hosted a whole series of workshops in the Central Valley and Southern California in order to spread information about the program. And as a result of that, we've seen a marked increase in the number of planning grant applications, 10 this year, up from 6 last year and 0 the year before. So SGC, seeing those good results, has decided to carry on the TA program another year, which should help the SALC planning grants program continue to gain momentum. Another effort that we are putting forth to further this is another technical assistance contract, this time with UC Ag and Natural Resources. And UCANR will be hosting 2 on-the-ground positions that will provide technical assistance for planning grants, and those positions will be based in Fresno and Riverside. And then finally, SALC also received some assistance from SGC's Boost program, which worked with the City of Salinas to submit a SALC application. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a brief overview of the process that staff use to review planning grant proposals. For planning grants, there's an optional pre-proposal component. We received 11 pre-proposals on which staff provided feedback. And ultimately, one application didn't come forward because of fire-related impacts, and we hope we see that one next year. But otherwise, they were all fantastic, and we recommend funding all of them. Applicants could receive up to 100 points. The criteria included a description of project need, co-benefits associated with the project, evidence of collaboration amongst stakeholders, and integration with other planning processes. Staff conducted initial review and then took the projects to the interagency committee for further review. And then that, just FYI, that committee consists of representatives from CDFA, CNRA, DWR, CARB, and SGC. And all of the projects that are before you today scored within the 70 to 90 point range. Next slide. So here's the first few of them. Each of them meets the statutory requirements and guidelines objectives, and staff were impressed with the thoughtfulness and creativity that went into each of the proposals. There's a few more. Next slide, please. Great, here's the rest. These proposals, they all seek to address the goals of SALC. They encourage infill development, seek to protect farmland, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions as required. They also address specific local goals as decided by those local entities, such as ensuring ag economic viability, protecting farmland for climate amelioration, and integrating ag needs into the local general plan, for example. The total funds requested for planning grants, again, was about $2.37 million. Next slide. So I wanted to give you more detail about just one example of a planning project we got. The highest scoring project application this round came from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. And SACOG is a municipal planning organization made up of the counties of El Dorado, Sacramento, Sutter, Placer, Yolo, and Yuba. And some of you may be aware of previous work that SACOG has done through its Rural Urban Connection Strategy, or RUCS, that supports the region's rural, agricultural, and natural resource lands, and about the related regional prosperity strategy that identified food and agricultural systems as a top priority for fostering inclusive economic growth. So now SACOG would like to use SALC funding to create a Coordinated Rural Opportunities Plan, or CROP, which would inventory previous RUCS research to understand the challenges ag's facing and how to address them, identify places where the current strategies aren't working or where there are no strategies, and create a framework that identifies and coordinates infrastructure that's needed to support continued viability of ag in the region. I wanted to include this quote from the application that I feel really captures the approach we're trying to take with SALC. Much like urban areas, rural economic viability is fundamentally derived from land use decisions and investments in support of infrastructure. In other words, successful agriculture doesn't just happen, it's the product of decisions that are intentionally made to support it. So next slide, please. So now I will tell you about how we reviewed the acquisition grants. For acquisition grants, which includes both easements and fee title, a pre-proposal is required. So staff received those pre-proposals in May and performed an initial assessment of the project and provided feedback to the applicants. We checked for eligibility and readiness, and then we scored them based on a variety of factors, including threat of conversion and other things like environmental, economic, and habitat co-benefits. Staff conducted preliminary title reviews. They checked public databases for any hazardous conditions or environmental issues, and then they quantified the emissions that would be avoided as a result of each project. So site visits are a really important component of the application process. And for the first time ever, we conducted virtual site visits for each project because of COVID-19. And I just want to say that the applicants did a really great job of accommodating this format. So finally, once we had the projects evaluated and scored, we presented them to the interagency committee for deliberation and recommendations. And the result is the proposed awards you have before you today. Next slide, please. So just to give you an overview of the suite of projects, we had a total of 53 acquisition applications, including the 2 fee title applications. And I know this map's a little bit small, but the round dots show the location of the applicant projects. And as you can see, we received proposals as far north as Shasta and as far south as Imperial in a total of 19 counties. We're really proud of that. We've had trouble getting projects down south in the past, and so this is a big deal for us. There were 3 projects that qualified for priority population benefits, either through benefits they're providing to downstream communities for watershed protection, and then one of the projects provides educational benefits to an adjacent school. So qualifying for priority population benefits means that match funding is not going to be required for those projects. This was also the first year that applicants had the opportunity to apply for funding for the creation of a management plan, and over half the applicants requested that funding. Next slide, please. So I want to get into a little detail about the fee title acquisitions. As I mentioned, this is the first year that fee title acquisitions are eligible for funding. And so this means that rather than only purchasing the development rights on a property, which is known as a conservation easement, the applicant can also purchase the property outright. So to ensure parity between fee and easement applications under the SALC program, we are only funding the amount equivalent to what we would pay for an easement. In other words, 75% of the value of the easement. And the fee purchases, and why we added this, is that they open additional possibility for conservation strategies, such as making it possible for an applicant to buy a property that might otherwise be sold for development, so they can sell it to a party that will continue to farm it. The program received 2 fee title acquisition applications, both of which staff are recommending for funding. The projects are located in San Benito and Santa Clara Valley, and I'm going to tell you about the one in Santa Clara. So next slide, please. So the applicant for this project is the Santa Clara Open Space Authority. The property consists of a 60-acre ranch located in the Coyote Valley. The property has recently been used for non-irrigated hay production, but the applicant intends to restore it to irrigated row crop production. The project contributes to a series of protected properties, which you can see in red crosshatch on this map. And I just want to remind the council that the Open Space Authority has been a 2-time grantee of SALC planning grants, and this project is being pursued as part of the Agricultural Protection Plan as a result of those grants. The Open Space Authority and the County of Santa Clara are contributing the match funding for this project. Next slide, please. So next, I'd like to tell you about the staff's recommendation for the agricultural conservation easements. This was, as I mentioned, an incredibly competitive round. So of the 51 easement applications we received, only 20 are being recommended for funding for amount totaling $43,810,196. This suite of projects would protect a total of 14,028 acres of farm and rangeland and would avoid an estimated 4.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So about half the projects for which we received applications, as I mentioned, the applicants requested funding for a management plan, and of the ones recommended for funding, 12 out of 20 have management plans included in the projects. I'd like to note that there are a couple projects that we want to fund, but for which we have conditions. So the projects in Imperial, we would require that the applicant ensures through the easement deed that the water rights can't be severed from the property. And for the projects near Fall River Mills in Shasta, which include significant wetland habitat in addition to the ag values, we would require inclusion of the wetland habitat as a conservation value in the easement to ensure protection of that habitat going forward. Next slide, please. So we don't have time to look at each and every project, but I wanted to highlight for you a few of the projects that staff were particularly impressed with. And I'll start with project 37. The applicant for this project is the Shasta Land Trust, and this property consists of a 1,509-acre ranch located within the Redding sphere of influence. The owners have a strong relationship with the federally listed tribe, the Redding Rancheria, and the tribe can access the property for cultural needs. The landowners also partner with the UC Berkeley Grizzly Corps program, which provides recent college grads work experience and training in regenerative agriculture and forest and fire resilience. And this project also includes the development and implementation of a management plan. Next slide, please. The second project, number 29, is a 541-acre cattle ranch located in San Benito County, adjacent to the city of San Juan Bautista. It's the project on the right. The other one is another one we're recommending. So the property includes annual grassland, coast live oak woodland, wetland, riparian habitat, and provides a wildlife corridor between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Gabilan and Diablo ranges. Grazing on the property reduces the risk of high-intensity wildfire immediately adjacent to the city. And this project also includes the development and implementation of a management plan. We also received a message that the city of San Juan Bautista is highly supportive of this project. Next slide, please. So finally, the last one I'll talk about today is project number 36, and this is a 752-acre cattle ranch and avocado orchard that's located adjacent to the city of Ventura. The landowner here employs seasonal, high-intensity, short-duration grazing to promote native perennial grasses. And the landowner also provides youth with hands-on environmental education opportunities through partnerships with the Ventura and Oxnard school districts, as well as through the Boys and Girls Club. This landowner let us know they'd received multiple offers for this property so that it could be divided into large lot or rural ranchette estates, and this project would preclude that from happening. This project also includes the development and implementation of a management plan. Next slide, please. So that concludes my description of the recommended award projects. And so before we return to the recommended action, I just want to point out some next steps. The round 7 SALT guidelines are scheduled to come before you in April. And to get to that point, we need to have a draft out by January in order to hold workshops and accept public comments, which we would do in March. And then we'd bring the final draft to you, as I said, in April. So some things that we're aiming to address this coming round will include racial equity, a better connection with affordable housing and sustainable communities through our planning grants program, and administrative clarifications. We are also analyzing the possibility of starting a stakeholder engagement process, a longer one also around the round 8 guidelines, so that we can go deeper into potential equity related revisions. We really want people to have a chance to contribute to that. So once the guidelines are up, we're going to be sending out an e-blast to all our stakeholders to let them know. So folks should stay tuned for that. And with that, next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. So I will return to the recommended action before you, which is to approve the staff recommendation to award $56,046,171 in fiscal year 1920 GGRF funds to support the acquisition of 20 easements, 2 fee title acquisitions, and 10 planning grants. And next slide, if you want. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks so much. That was a great presentation and really reflects a couple things that I think we talk about a lot in this group and individually. One, I was really happy to hear your focus, and it's something Secretary Crowfoot and I work on a fair amount on the role of these lands as sort of buffers and contributing to climate resilience by kind of protecting more developed areas from fire. And I just recently was hiking in Napa County and had the experience, and for those who haven't seen this, of really seeing the fires stop at the vineyards. It's really stark, actually, if you are up there to see that in operation. So I wanted to thank you for that, and also say thank you for, and I know this was something that the SGC staff and the DOC staff really worked on this year, really showing that this kind of can happen all over the state, and that there's like a lot of geographic diversity in your projects. So thank you for that. Do we have council comment or questions? I know we have a number of comment cards from the public on this item, not as many as last meeting, I promise, but a number, and we want to get to those. It looks like Secretary Ross has, I don't know what you would have to say about this item, Karen.
Yeah, I'm not excited at all. Well, okay, whatever it is. No, I want to hear the public comments, but I just want to thank staff across agency at the Department of Conservation at SGC, the investment in, once again, technical assistance, doing the workshops and getting planning grants, because we know that's going to be really the magic sauce for keeping this going in ways that are even more strategic and to make sure they are happening in all parts of the state. So I just want to say thank you so much. I think we're seeing really good return on that investment.
Thanks, Secretary Ross. I see Secretary Crowfoot's hand up.
Yeah, I certainly share Secretary Ross's enthusiasm for the overall program and this round as well, and look forward to supporting it. I would ask Virginia if it's appropriate to consider integrating other priorities that have emerged through the executive order that was issued by the governor in the fall, namely biodiversity values and climate resilience. It sounds like there's already sensitivity within the program about or the evaluation of awards around preserving important habitats and protecting environmental values. But as I think about it,
that's something that we look at already. A little bit later in this meeting, my colleague's going to talk about how we've been using Replan to do some of that habitat and biodiversity assessment. So yeah, I would agree. These lands certainly serve multiple functions and should be appreciated for that.
Totally, and beyond just appreciated, it would be helpful to understand if there was a way to institutionalize those values or ensure that that awards were actually achieving those values. One of the things I'm focused on is obviously developing this pathway to conserving 30% of California by 2030. And in my mind anyways, working lands have a real important role in that. And I'm hoping that working lands are, part of the way that we can define conservation. And so I want to, in my mind, it would be ideal if SALC we're addressing obviously, GGRF criteria and existing goals around preservation of open space and reducing emissions, but then also we could be able to record these as part of our conservation efforts because of a slightly more formalized assessment of those values.
Yeah, we could absolutely do that. Like I mentioned with the examples of the conditions of funding on the Shasta Awards, where a project has been awarded because of specific conservation values, we try to include that in the conservation easement so that it's memorialized, that's part of the reason that we're doing this, and we want to make sure that those values persist.
Maybe just to add on to that question, and thank you, it was a great question. The other thing, Virginia, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my understanding from the materials is that the SALT program, when looking at greenhouse gas emissions, calculates really just the emissions that are avoided by lack of conversion, right, of the land to urban uses.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
But you don't consider the potential for carbon removal from the lands, I don't think, which is another part of the 30 by 30 executive order. Is that wrong?
We do in a very limited way. Right now, the quantification methodology accounts for the loss of soil carbon due to construction impacts. So if we wanted to add more accounting into it, we certainly could. The other thing I would add is that with Denny Grossman's replan tool, we're able to take stock of the existing carbon in the land base. And so we can start using that as part of the scoring criteria too, if the council wishes.
Well, this is a part of, I know, a larger discussion happening at CARB through the upcoming scoping plan and a number of other places through the work that Secretary Crowfoot's agency is doing to coordinate everybody on the natural working lands agenda. So it's definitely an active discussion, and of course everybody wants there to be alignment on how this is addressed, but it does seem like something to make sure that SALC is a piece of as well, given the important intersection with the climate commitments. So it just came to my mind as well.
One thing I'll add on Secretary Crowfoot's point is I would definitely, we've been trying to broaden the participation in the interagency group to capture some of these broader values. And so, for instance, Sigma is a topic that has also come up in this context. And so trying to bring those perspectives together and would definitely welcome that as we move on the next round of guidelines.
I don't see other hands here. I'm looking at you all. Great. Did we want to move to the taking action, to the action item? Do we want to put that back up? I don't know where it went, but maybe we could put up the action statement again, if that's easy. Sorry, I just did the thing where I talked on mute. This is the recommended action again, and I don't know if we have a motion.
I would move to approve the action.
Secretary Gordon, would you like to do public comment before the action?
I'm sorry. Yes. See, I'm just not doing well today. I'm having a hard time with process today. I think it's because I have a million different windows open and I'm trying to monitor the private chats, the public chats, the teams, that sort of, and the text that people are sending me, and it's very challenging. So I will just beg your patience, everybody. Chairing a meeting in these times is it turns out very challenging. Yes, I would like to hear public comment, and there's a lot of it, and I really apologize to the public. Do not take that as meaning anything. I actually really value the public comment. So let's go to that.
Thank you very much. So folks, if you've signed up to make public comment on this item, listen for your name, and I will be calling on you in that order. So here, and when you hear your name, please use the raise hand function in Zoom to raise your hand, or if you're making your comment over the phone in Zoom, press *9 when you hear your name. So the folks signed up to comment on this item are EJ Remsen, Nancy Schaefer, Clay Downing, Renee DeVere Oki, Susie Kirshner, Sarah Press, Mark Landgraf or Lena Ian, Catherine Ledan, Ashley Paulsworth, Emily Renzel, Stanley Van Vleck, Kane Sylvie, Cheryl Landrum, Katie Patterson, Jeannie Merrill, and Devin Rothman. So go ahead and raise your hands in there. Once I call your name, Michael will unmute your line, your microphone, so that you'll be able to begin speaking after that. You don't need to take any further action. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment, and there will be, if you're joining by video, you'll be able to see a timer on your screen, so it can help you track your time. And if you haven't yet signed up for public comment and you did want to comment on this item, you're welcome to go to sgc.ca.gov/meetings and fill out the public comment form. And we'll make one final call for comments at the end, just in case you're unable to access the form. With that, I welcome our first commenter on the SALC item, EJ Remsen with the Nature Conservancy. EJ, you might be double muted.
How's that? How's that?
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. Good afternoon. I'm EJ Remsen with the Nature Conservancy, and I served on the stakeholder group that prepared the Ventura County Planning Grant application. I'm speaking in support of its approval. Ventura County is the 10th most productive agricultural county in the United States. It has about 100,000 acres of irrigated farmland and twice that much in grazing and ranch lands. And this farmland is the only barrier to preventing the Los Angeles metropolitan area from further expanding into Ventura County. So with this planning grant, we will develop strategies to ensure the long-term sustainability of agriculture in Ventura County. Your staff was very helpful as we prepared the planning grant application, and we also really appreciated the technical assistance that your consultants provided. So I hope you will approve it today. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that comment, EJ. Appreciate that.
Next is Nancy Schaefer with California Rangeland Trust. Nancy, I think you also might be double muted. There you go. Nancy, are you with us? Nancy, we can't hear you. I think what we'll do is we'll try to troubleshoot that issue with you, and then we'll call on the next person and come back to you. I apologize for that difficulty. Next, we'll go to Clay Downing with the County of Ventura Resource Management.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. My name is Clay Downing. I'm a planner with the county's Resource Management Agency, and I'm making a comment today in support of approval of the recommended action. So on behalf of my agency and I would hope all of our project stakeholders in our group, I just want to express appreciation to SGC and for the SALC program. We're really excited about the Ventura County Agricultural Conservation Planning Project. For us, it's going to give us an opportunity to really dive into working lands conservation, to better understand how we can keep agriculture viable in Ventura County, and how we can tie together some of the goals that I know are important to SGC, like the sustainability and climate action goals that we have in the county's general plan, which was just updated earlier this fall. So we can really take some new emerging ideas that we want to jump on and put those into a good place with this project. So in particular, I wanted to express gratitude for the leadership that was shown by some of our partners, particularly the Nature Conservancy and Ventura County Farm Bureau. They really took the lead for helping us build the local stakeholder group that we have and being champions for this project. And then last, I also wanted to express, as EJ did, that we're really thankful for the technical assistance that was available as part of this process. Working with Amy McPhee as part of Cultivate LLC and Serena Unger from Urban, Rural, and Regional Strategies was an incredible source of support for being able to present something that was well designed and ready. So thank you in advance, and I hope you'll support this project moving forward.
Thanks so much, Clay. I appreciate your comments. Next.
Yes, Renee DeVere-Oki from SACOG.
Great, can you hear me? All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good afternoon, Renee DeVere-Oki, speaking on behalf of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments and our partners in this project, which is the 6-county region, which is El Dorado, Placer, Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties, as well as our economic strategy partnership that we have here. So I wanted to thank the council and DOC staff for this award recommendation. Virginia, you gave a great overview of our project. We are very excited to start this work in our region and see this as the next component of our Rural Urban Connection Strategy program. And it is definitely a strong component of moving forward with our MTP SCS, our Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. We have all these acronyms here. So once again, thank you, and we are looking forward to moving forward on this project, and thank you, staff.
Thanks, Renee. Appreciate your comments.
Next up is Susie Kirchner, Inland Empire Resource Conservation District, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Susie Kirchner, and I'm the Programs Manager with Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. I just wanted to provide a comment today on behalf of the San Bernardino Valley Planning Project, submitted in partnership with the LAFCO for San Bernardino County. We just want to thank SGC and the staff for supporting this work, and we are really excited about the opportunity to engage our regional stakeholders in the San Bernardino Valley around a common vision and plan for preserving agriculture. This is a conversation that remains really important as we continue to experience a lot of growth in our region and are being challenged to find that balance between housing, infrastructure, and the preservation of natural and working lands. And I also wanted to just specifically thank SGC and DOC for providing technical assistance for this application process. The support really enabled us to refine our project proposal and engage these key stakeholders in our region that we needed to move the project forward. So thanks once again for your support of the SALC program and for providing that technical support to us to help our application be successful. So thank you, and that concludes my comment.
Thanks so much, Susie.
And Sarah Press with Sonoma Land Trust.
Okay, hi. Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Press with Sonoma Land Trust, and I just really want to thank the Strategic Growth Council for considering these recommendations, particularly to support the acquisition of an agricultural conservation easement over the Felder Ranch. This funding will help protect over 700 acres of grassland, oak woodland, riparian habitat, year-round creeks on Sonoma Mountain. The ranch is located between the cities of Sonoma and Petaluma in southern Sonoma County, where there is pressure for subdivision and conversion to more intensive uses. The Felder family has owned and operated this ranch for over 120 years. They are dedicated to continuing their sustainable cattle operation and are excited to be protecting their land. Also, Sonoma Land Trust really looks forward to the opportunity to further our relationship with the SALC program, whose work really is essential for land conservation that addresses climate resiliency. And that concludes my comments.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that.
Mark Landgraf, Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the Council. Mark Landgraf speaking on behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. We're really grateful for the hard work performed by the Department of Conservation staff led by Ms. Jameson and her team in updating the program guidelines and evaluating the project proposals and making recommendations to the Council. We also greatly appreciate the Growth Council's ongoing leadership on the SALC program, which is such an important element of the state's climate mitigation strategy. The Open Space Authority, in close collaboration with the County of Santa Clara and other partners, has definitely made hay, among other crops, of the planning grants provided through the SALC program, which have resulted in the Santa Clara Valley Ag Plan we are collectively implementing per the plan's recommendations. In addition to implementing the Ag Plan through conservation easements, hopefully also fee acquisitions, county land use policy amendments, et cetera, the Ag Plan has also served as a foundation for greater cross-jurisdictional partnerships in our region, such as that between the City of San Jose and Santa Clara County, which this week approved a board referral to consider an agricultural overlay in Mid-Coyote Valley as San Jose updates its general plan and in the process may release that landscape from its urban reserve sphere of influence. We're grateful to the department and the council for past support of our agricultural protection efforts and for today's recommendations and consideration of approval for a fee acquisition in Cuddy Valley that not only would keep a crucial piece of farmland in food production, but also protect its ecosystem services that include wildlife habitat and groundwater recharge, and lie within the Cuddy Valley Conservation Program established in statute. We also want to express support for the staff recommendation on the Bay Area Regional Ag Plan submitted by Santa Clara County, which could serve as an important statewide model. We are grateful for the opportunity for comment and support. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark, for all your work on several of those projects, but also for doing very impressively staying at exactly 2 minutes. I was impressed by you ended on the 2-minute mark. But thanks for your comments. Go ahead, Sandra.
He also made a fun hay joke. Catherine Ledan, Marin Agricultural Land Trust. Oops, Catherine, I think you might be muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good afternoon and thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Catherine Ledan and I'm the Director of Conservation for the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. And I'm here to thank you for considering approval of funding of Malt's salt project. The Bay Vista Ranch is 602 acres in the uplands above Tamales Bay. And the ranch is part of a dairy operation that provides organic milk to local cheesemakers, including Cowgirl Creamery and Bivalve Dairy. The dairy operation is also a recipient of the CDFA's Alternative Manure Management Program. And I think that provides an example of the Marin Agricultural Land Trust leveraging state climate programs. We're protecting land and then incentivizing sustainable management of those lands. I'd like to really emphasize that the SALT program has been a game changer for California agricultural conservationists. Having a steady source of funding over the last 6 years has made it possible for us to engage in strategic acquisitions that have magnified the impact of our work. I'll note finally that this program is also all the more important as we understand how important agriculture is to climate change mitigation and as we work to implement the governor's 30 by 30 executive order to engage working lands in California's climate solutions. Finally, I'd like to thank Virginia Jameson and her awesome staff. As always, they're incredibly supportive and professional. And they've been very responsive as well to input from the land trust community, and we appreciate it very much. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those great comments.
Great. Nancy Schaefer, I think, is back with us. I think we were able to troubleshoot the audio issue there. So with California Rangeland Trust. Nancy?
Hi there. Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Yay. I want to thank Michael for troubleshooting with me. I'm Nancy Schaefer of the California Rangeland Trust. And I want to thank the Council and the Department of Conservation for their continuing support for our projects, including 3 that are on today's agenda. And for the Council members who are unfamiliar with the Rangeland Trust, we were started in 1998 by a group of ranchers who wanted to work with other ranchers who wanted to conserve the significant agricultural and natural resources on their property. And today I'm speaking on behalf of Alan Rosasco, whose project is recommended for funding. Alan is even less technologically inclined than I am, so yes, I speak on his behalf. He is very appreciative of the support for the funding for 2 easements on these 2 ranches that are located in the eastern foothill region of Madera County, the 989 Oakhurst Ranch, 989 acre Oakhurst Ranch, and 1700 acre Raymond Ranch. These ranches have been in his family since the 1880s, and his grandmother's homesteader cabin actually still stands on the Raymond Ranch. Oakhurst Ranch is adjacent to the town of Oakhurst, and it is the last ranch remaining in open space along Highway 49 between the community of Awania and the town of Oakhurst. And both ranches are zoned for 40-acre minimum parcel sizes, so really are right for rural residential development. The sale of the easements will allow Alan to continue ranching, to buy out his family members' interests so he owns the property free and clear, and to purchase an in-holding in the Oakhurst Ranch that is owned by his cousins. So really want to thank the Department of Conservation staff who continue to do an excellent job, and we're just great to work with. And with that, I'm done.
Thanks so much for those great comments, and glad you were able to get through this time. Sandra?
Thanks. Ashley Paulsworth with County of Monterey.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. My name is Ashley Paulsworth, and I am the Sustainability Program Manager at the County of Monterey. And like others, I just wanted to say thank you so much for considering our application and for considering funding our application to work on the agricultural portion of our climate action plan in Monterey. It will be the first community-wide action plan adopted in the county. So we're really excited to get started and implement some of the synergistic strategies that were recommended in our sustainable community strategy, and really have a widespread stakeholder engagement activity through this award, and implement some climate action and resiliency locally. So that's all from me. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for those comments.
Emily Renzel with San Benito Agricultural Land Trust.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are.
We hear you.
Chair Gordon and members of the council. I'm Emily Renzel, president of the San Benito Agricultural Land Trust. Our mission is to conserve regionally significant lands that sustain productive agriculture, preserve open space, and maintain the rural character of the county. We are very pleased and gratified that SALC funding is recommended for the application of Trust for Public Land and Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, Project 29, a conservation easement on 541 acres of grazing land that acts as a greenbelt along the southwestern edge of historic San Juan Bautista. It was featured in your presentation today. San Benito Agricultural Land Trust owns the adjoining 520-acre Rancho Larios open space. Preservation of the proposed site will connect over 1,000 acres of open space. With the 2,700-acre Rocks Ranch acquisition by Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, also recommended for SALC funding, on the other side of Rancho Larios, almost 4,000 contiguous acres of open space and grazing lands will be preserved. This will expand and protect important wildlife corridors connecting Santa Cruz Mountains and the Gabilan Range in San Benito and Monterey counties. Thank you for considering the TPL and Land Trust of Santa Cruz County grants, and we hope that you'll approve both of them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it.
Stanley Van Vleck with Van Vleck Ranching and Resources.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair and distinguished members. I am here to support the easements that are going to be placed on our family's ranching operation and be held by Rangeland Trust, located in eastern Sacramento County. First, I want to thank you for the consideration and also for the recommendation from staff and the work that your staff and Department of Conservation staff did a tremendous job. And so Virginia, for you and your team, thank you very much. Really tremendous job at that. Also want to provide you some background on the land that you'll be protecting and the business behind it and the family behind it. We've been producing food and fiber in the Sacramento region for over 160 years. If you put that in context, we've been producing that food before Lincoln was president. So we've been here a long time, and our goal is to be able to be here a long time longer. being able to provide food and fiber for local families. We're also proud that the way this is set up, and it's actually very unique because we're doing 500 acres with this, but we've already done 3,500 acres partnering with you and the Sacramento County Habitat Conservation Plan with the City of Elk Grove and others to be able to put together a collage. And this program that you have right now through SALC is really important because it serves a niche of this balance of air quality, habitat, and preserving ag. Not a lot have those three characteristics. So again, what you're doing is important because the 500 acres that we're looking at here didn't fit in these other niches. So for us, this was a linchpin. And we really want to thank you because when you help protect our operation, we run other two large long-term family businesses that are over 13,000 acres. So this 500 acres helps to preserve that large amount of land in Sacramento County. We appreciate the time and effort. We're supported by the Board of Supervisors and local environmental organizations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan, for those great comments. Love the collage analogy and just the reminder that these are in addition to so many existing types of land preservation strategies. Really appreciate that. Sandra?
Kane Sylvie with the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kane Sylvie. I'm the Conservation Project Manager with the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County. And I'd just like to thank the Sustainable Growth Council for their consideration of the Lazy at Less agricultural conservation easement. This project will protect a 320-acre working cattle ranch along Highway 1 near Morro Bay in coastal San Luis Obispo County. I'd also like to thank the SALC staff for their recommendation of this project, as well as their support and hard work during this round of funding. The SALC program has been a great funding partner for our organization over the last few years, and we really look forward to the continuation of this program into the future. So, thank you all.
Thanks, Kane. Appreciate that. Next, sorry.
Cheryl Landrum with Resource Conservation District of Greater San Diego County.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Landrum, and I'm the Executive Director of the Resource Conservation District of Greater San Diego County. And I just want to also thank you for your consideration. This planning grant is very important to us. The San Diego region is home to more than 5,000 farms on over 222,000 acres and is the 19th largest farm economy of over 3,000 counties in the United States. On a national scale, the San Diego region is the second leading producer of avocado and nursery crops, accommodates more small farms, which would be less than 10 acres in size, than any other county, and has the most part-time farmers who create local products and drive the economy. Unfortunately, San Diego is severely threatened by urbanization right now, and due to high land and water costs, it's driving many farmers to halt agricultural production and in some cases sell their lands. So we're hoping through this grant that we can counter this trend, and the SALC project will really support San Diego's climate action plan and its goal of reducing greenhouse emissions as well. So thank you again to SGC and DOC and our great team of Amy and Serena. Thank you.
Thank you for those really nice comments. Sandra?
Yes, and before I read the next name, I just want to remind people that if you did want to comment on this item and haven't yet signed up to do so, please do so at sgc.ca.gov/meetings. There's a link to a form there, and that's how you sign up. If you're not able to sign up, just go ahead and raise your hand in the chat or in the Zoom call using raise hand, or if you're calling in on the phone, press *9, and we'll call on you once we get through this list. And our next speaker is Katie Patterson with American Farmland Trust. Hi, Katie, I think you're muted. Katie, can you press *6, please? There you go.
Fantastic. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. What an exciting opportunity. One, I don't want to belabor the meeting here too long, but I think there's some important key themes to touch on here. And one is the excitement of the different types of projects, the range of projects, the acceleration and interest in the SALC program. You know, myself with American Farmland Trust, this is a program that we have been very excited to see and have been pleased with its evolution over the number of years now that it's been in place. So congratulations to all of those involved and those who are on the docket today to potentially receive some project funding here. That goes a long ways. American Farmland Trust is a national land trust organization, for those of you not familiar with us, and we have released national research called Farms Under Threat, State of the States this last year. And in recognition of that, it's important to look at California and how far we've come in land conservation and agricultural conservation in particular, and recognize that we still have more to do. And I think the themes that were being drawn out today between wildfire resiliency, climate adaptation and resiliency, wildlife, you know, habitat corridors and resiliency, all those things, you know, all point to our natural and working lands. And we're excited about the opportunity to really take on some of those issues in this next year and kind of the cataclysmic, in a positive way, of course, that we're set on for, you know, the scoping plan and for the EO to really flesh out and see how we can, you know, maximize the state's investment in these priority areas. And we really think that agricultural land is well suited to do that. At our current rate, we are investing 11 cents per capita per year in California, and we can compare that to other states like Delaware, for example, that are investing at $6.03. So funding is a big area that we need to pay attention to and how we can get more creative on those fronts. We're also still losing 50,000 acres a year, and that will put us on a trend if we keep going by mid-century to lose 1.4 million acres. And so that's not okay. That's something that we absolutely need to reconcile if we expect to get the same type of natural and working land benefits that we described to really get into place to meet our aggressive climate goals, let alone some of these other opportunity areas that agricultural lands can provide. We look forward to being a part of these conversations going forward. We recognize that, you know, as a national land trust who does do land transactions, we alone can't, you know, solve this problem. You know, we need partners with state agencies. We need partnerships like the local governments that have applied for programs here, land trusts alike, and the capacity there needs to continue to be supported. And we think that this is a great milestone to celebrate today in advancing the SALC program. And we look forward to engaging in all of these administration activities and the new SALC guidelines in the future. And one last thought is—
you are over time,
you know,
Katie, so super fast, if you don't mind. Thank you.
I just want to praise the farmers and ranchers who've partnered in this California future. You know, kudos to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Great last point. Really appreciate it.
Jeannie Merrill with CalCan.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly today. We are also very excited to see just the ongoing tremendous demand for the SALC program, and it's excellent to see a robust set of acquisition projects and planning grants. Yesterday, we released a report called Resilient California, which does a review of the SALC and AHSC programs. And I won't discuss that really today, as we're speaking with Dr. Bedsworth, or Director Bedsworth, rather, on presenting our report findings to the council in the new year. But one thing I wanted to just briefly note is among our recommendations is to continue and expand the kind of technical assistance that the Department of Conservation has made available, particularly on the planning grant side. We're just seeing time and again that working in advance with local governments to develop those planning grants is really paying off. And we're so excited to see the proposal to fund 10 planning grants. So really appreciate the work of the department on making that technical assistance available and encourage that work to continue. One also just note of caution is that in the course of doing our review of SALC and AHSC programs and looking at how they're working in tandem to support smart growth infill development strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, is that the pandemic, as you know, is really laying bare a lot of the vulnerabilities of our communities and making these particular strategies of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by supporting compact, affordable housing and farmland protection on the urban suburban edge challenging. And it's challenging because of the upending we're seeing of public transit systems, overcrowded farm worker housing contributing to spread of the virus, economic strains on farmers, many of whom have had markets disappear during the virus, during the shelter in place orders. All of that makes this work tougher, but also requires creative thinking and a scaling up of these efforts in the new year to really bring together climate resilience with economic recovery, and smart growth strategies, we believe, really need to be at the center of that. So greatly appreciate the work of the council and look forward to discussing this further with you in the new year. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie, and thanks for bringing in so many of those different issues in your work that relate to different people on the council. I also will say that Director Bedsworth is Dr. Bedsworth, and I personally think that we should acknowledge people's PhDs wherever we possibly can and use that title. So Dr. Bedsworth, it is. Next, Sandra.
Devin Rothman with the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. I'm Devin Rothman, representing the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County. And I want to thank you for considering application for easement acquisition on the 955-acre Restoration Oaks Ranch. The ranch supports both a cattle business and also a U-pick blueberry farm that is not only a community favorite, but provides a really important connection between residents of the county and the land and people who provide them food. And the landowners also are really serious about carbon sequestration. They've received a Healthy Soils grant from the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and some of this funding from the easement will help them to continue pursuit of that kind of sequestration work and promoting soil health and capturing carbon on their ranch. And I also want to just thank Virginia and her staff at DOC. They really have been great partners to the land trust community, as has been said by a number of other people who've commented here, and it's really been appreciated. Thanks.
Thanks, Devin. Appreciate those comments.
Great. And our last comment card is from Sabella Kraus with Sustainable Agriculture Education.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. Again, my name is Sabella Kraus, president of the nonprofit Sustainable Agriculture Education, SAGE. And I'd like to thank DOC staff and the council for their recommendation to fund the framework for a Bay Area Regional Agricultural Plan. This project builds on decades of work of Bay Area municipalities and land trusts to protect working lands around the Bay Area. And now, with the engagement of multiple partners, this project allows us to take a regional landscape scale approach to agriculture. And through partnership with our regional planning agency, MDC and ABAG, to more substantially integrate agricultural resources and the agricultural economy into Plan Bay Area. This project was also a key big idea identified in the Bay Area Food Futures Roadmap, produced by SAGE, a high-level collaborative action plan for investing in our regional food system as a foundation for regional resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabella, and thank you everybody for your comments. I think, Sandra, that was the last comment, is that right?
That is the very last one, and I'm not seeing any hands raised in the list of attendees, so I think we are complete.
Perfect. And can I get all of the voting council members or proxies. I see, I know Amanda has replaced Secretary Kofod. I know Lauren has replaced Secretary Blumenfeld, although she is called by his name still, which is confusing. And Darwin, we see you, so thank you. And interestingly, Secretary Blumenfeld himself still has a picture up too. It's you guys are just cloning yourselves over there at Cali, PA. Anyway, now I actually can ask, I believe, for the motion and the vote on this recommended action, which I apologize for doing too early last time. And just want to say thank you again to all the commenters who really said some important points about the role that this program is playing in their communities. So thank you to them. All right, I'm going to redo this because the people have changed. Is there a motion?
I'll move. Karen Ross.
Thanks, Karen. Is there a second?
Again.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Doug.
Chair Gordon.
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Sanchez.
Aye.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Aye.
Deputy Secretary Hansen.
Aye.
Assistant Secretary Soulier. I believe you were
Sorry
here.
about that. Aye. Thank you.
Great. Deputy Secretary Musavi.
Aye.
Secretary Ross.
Aye.
Councilmember Capritz.
Aye.
And Councilmember Munoza.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. It's gratifying to move some really exciting projects forward and really appreciate everybody. All right, we have one more significant item on the agenda, which is an update on something we've already heard about a bit, which is the Regional Conservation Planning Tool replan that's being put forward, worked on through SGC and also through Department of, I think, Water Resources. Am I right about that? Or conservation. Anyway, we'll find out, and then you'll hear what's actually happening from people who are actually doing it. Louise, any introduction to this before we turn to Denny and others?
Yes, I'll give a quick introduction to this item because it does go back several years, dating back to a previous council action from 2016. And so I just want to remind folks an interesting role when SGC was created. We had a role to play in providing support, as we do now through technical assistance and other tools, to support the regions in achieving their sustainable community strategies, development and conservation goals. And part of the way to do that was through data and tools. And so this item is going to present an overview of a tool called Replan. And Replan is a conservation planning decision support tool. And this began following a council resolution in 2016 and was actually launched with funding from the High Speed Rail Authority. And we've continued that work in partnership with the Wildlife Conservation Board, as well as the Department of Water Resources. And the shared goal really back in 2016 was to take a regional approach to conservation to enable looking not just at a project scale, but to look at regional conservation to improve the quality and interconnectivity of those projects and really support more holistic and effective mitigation planning in particular. And so we've continued this work through several partnerships that you'll see and hear about today. And the tool has also been developed through a collaborative process among state agencies and federal partners to pull together different data sets. And I think it's really an opportune time. We're coming to the end of this work in terms of our funding to support this. But I think what's really valuable is it demonstrates what I think is a challenge in many spaces that we work with, and now tackling some of these complex climate and environmental challenges is how do we bring all the right data and information to bear on those decisions. And I think Replan provides a really nice example of how to do that in the conservation space. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Denny to give a bit of an introduction to the model itself, the tool itself, and then we'll hear from some of the applications, including one on the SALT program that Virginia had mentioned. But we hope that this is just a helpful update and helps to think about different ways we can support ongoing challenges using integrated data tools.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to share progress. in the development of some of these methods and data and tools to get them to everybody in order to make sure that we're making good planning decisions. For the we could go to the next slide. So as was mentioned, there's a lot of things that we've been trying to put together relative to making good planning decisions. And an integrated regional conservation development program was kicked off back in around 2014 to really figure out what we can do to advance the promotion of a sustainable regional balance of conservation development. What kind of information and tools do we really need to put in place to help implement that vision? And the thing that was realized is that development plans push ahead, but we really weren't bringing together the rich conservation information that California has to have it as a product that people could use when they're making development decisions and or conservation decisions in one place, have access to the data, and to be able to see all the different information that's been collected. And so we really have pushed forward to develop methods for a regional conservation plan so that we can do a better job at integrated regional planning. Next slide. So we brought this concept to the Strategic Growth Council, and the council resolved in 2014 to coordinate state agencies for the development and implementation of an integrated regional planning approach, particularly for regional development, natural resource conservation in California. And then this has gone very, very closely in hand with the California Biodiversity Council that has 41 members of federal, state, and local governments that basically decided that this is something that they needed to do when they were formed 25 years ago. And so we're very happy to see this reappear. And they also passed a resolution to bring all of their member agencies to support this and moving it forward. Next slide. So the mandate that was put in front of us was to advance regional assessment methods, to have information at the right scale and the right types of information to inform planning processes, to help develop as needed and to integrate sort of core regional planning data sets, to develop planning tools that will help use this data to be able to address specific issues, and to create an accessible platform that will allow people to access these data sets and tools. SGC, working in concert with the California Biodiversity Council, created an interagency working team to come up with all of these, to make sure that we had input from all the right porters, and buy-in, which included the Department of Conservation, Water Resources, the Energy Commission, heavily dependent on information generated by Department of Fish and Wildlife, Caltrans, the Nature Conservancy, UC Davis, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, and the council itself were heavily involved in coming up with methods and tools and data sets to achieve the mandate. Next slide. So a key piece that came out of here was the concept of regional conservation assessments. How do we bring together all the information that's really needed to be able to quickly be able to figure out how important a piece of land is relative to conservation and resource management? And so this interagency team developed methods based on past scientific work to figure out which species and what ecosystems and special habitats need to be included into this process, to pull together distribution maps so that we know the extent across a particular region, provide different ranks for those things that are of greater conservation importance than others, and then to model these across a region to basically show where the hotspots are to create a conservation value map, and then make all of this available. Next slide. The map on the left shows the different terrestrial ecoregions where this work has been completed. So 3 major ecoregions, the Modoc, the Mojave, and the Central Valley. And then with the cooperation from DWR, we've actually pushed forward the concept of an aquatic regional assessment that's on a watershed basis rather than a terrestrial ecoregion basis. And those have been completed for 3 major watersheds that intersect with the Central Valley. Next slide. And then, as discussed earlier, this all needs to be put together in such a way that people can access it efficiently and be able to apply it to address their specific issues. And so we built a platform, which is being called Replan, which really allows you to integrate all these detailed conservation information with a lot of other data sets to be able to really help people address their planning issues across state agencies and beyond. This was primarily created with the help of the Conservation Biology Institute and UC Davis as a core team, along with the broader team that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. In addition to the detailed conservation information, I just want to quickly review the amount of data that actually has been compiled in this tool that can be brought to bear to conservation and regional planning decision making. There's a lot of boundaries in terms of the state or terrestrial ecoregions, watersheds, and counties. There's a number of environmental and conservation factors, whether it be wetlands or many of the conservation data sets that have been generated by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, whether it be CNDDB or the SWAP targets or the areas of conservation emphasis. And so there's many of those data sets that are in there. Next slide. In addition, we've included a number of land designation and land use factors, whether it be protected areas and easements or land use categories that have come from county general plans, who the owners are of different properties, where there's designated critical habitat, and information about disadvantaged communities. And then we also have climate change factors that are a combination of different models that show where there's high levels or low levels of climate change exposure and sensitivity. And then finally, we wanted to integrate different ecosystem service co-benefits to show if one took an action, how it would relate to whether it be prime ag and rangelands, from FMMP, from Department of Conservation, total ecosystem carbon stock, and we work with CARB to use their data to include in the tool, and or groundwater recharge potential that came out of a study from Davis. Next slide. So all of this was integrated into the tool, and one could summarize the major functions of the tool in terms of allowing people to define their region of interest, where they need it to work, to be able to take some or all of these factors and put them in the tool and say, within my area of interest, where are the regions that have the combination of factors? And so it really is a great starting place to say, let's start to work here. And then you can use the screen, or you can upload, or you can draw your own sites to do more detailed analysis of different places relative to these different factors. And then the tool has a number of functions that allow you to evaluate and to report on the properties, either individually, site by site, or to be able to compare different sites. So there was a lot of advances that were put into the tool with support from partners and collaborators. And then the next question is, how do we move it forward to get it used? So we really continue to reach out with the different partners to say, how can we use this to advance your programs? And the next part of this presentation is different panelists who are going to be able to share their experience in terms of how they use the core tool and or adaptations we were able to create to the tool. And so I'm going to now introduce 3 partners in succession to basically walk through their use cases of the tool. So I'd like to start with the next slide, please. The Department of Water Resources. And I'd like to introduce Ted Frink, the branch manager for special restoration initiatives within the Division of Regional Assistance, to share the experience of DWR in working with them and how they were able to use this tool.
All right. Can you hear me all right? Am I coming through?
Yes, we hear you, Ted.
I'm
Very
good, Ted.
good. Well, good afternoon, Chair Gordon and committee members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come talk with you today about my work with DWR and Dr. Grossman on the replan tool. I want to tell you my story of inspiration and opportunity of getting to work with SGC and Dr. Grossman on working it through and developing this particular tool, and how I saw the opportunity to bring best available science to bear on some of the program and work in DWR that I've been in charge of. So a little background on myself. I've been at the Department of Water Resources for 28 years now. And past 15 years, I've been lucky to be the representative or a representative from the Department of Water Resources on the California Biodiversity Council. And in that role, I count myself lucky that I got to be introduced and engaged with the Strategic Growth Council through Dr. Danny Grossman. And obviously the introduction to the replan tool at the time, IRCAD, or Integrated Regional Conservation and Development Tool. So with that, I will give you a brief overview of the inspiration that I got from Denny and the introduction of this tool, and how I could see it being applied to the work that I was in charge of at the department, and how we leverage that information and the ability of this tool to bring best available science to bear on a grant program that we have going on in the department over the past 35 years now. So quickly, let's go on to the next slide. So in working with Strategic Growth Council and the Biodiversity Council on the early iterations of the replan tool and developing regional conservation assessments, it became obvious to me very quickly that there was an opportunity in this tool to be able to bring together a lot of the work that the department does and support it in a decision support tool, the replan tool, by leveraging the best available science that tool brings to bear on the programs. So as you saw, there's a wealth of data that had been brought in to the tool, mostly in terrestrial data. And one of my inspirations was from the Department of Water Resources perspective, we obviously do work with water. And one of the data sets that I felt I could help bring into the replan tool was a data set of aquatic resources. And so through conversations with Denny, we were able to provide some funding to advance that idea and bring some new data sets specific to aquatic resources into the tool, and then therefore able to help support my program. And in addition to that, through discussions with Denny and the Strategic Growth Council and Biodiversity Council team, I was inspired to even look at the overarching abilities of this tool to improve efficiency and effectiveness of individual programs across the department. Obviously, allowing broad access to very critical scientific and landscape planning data sets, and then associated analytical and reporting tools. The ability to use this tool and improve connectivity across DWR programs, the things that are in common across many of the things that or responsibility of DWR to advance common objectives from climate change to, of course, water resources management. And then help ensure that DWR programs are well integrated through other priority state programs as well. And then ultimately, to my specific needs and uses in my program, provide a comprehensive tool for a grant program for proposal submission and evaluation. So there was so many multiple levels of the ability for us to use this tool. It was very exciting for me as a scientist. I've been an aquatic ecologist in the department for that 28 years, and I've always been interested and inspired to bring best available science as part of the mission of the department even, and its strategic approach to bear on decision making in our programs and across DWR. So this was one of those places that inspired me through that use of best available science. Let's go to the next slide. So,
and Ted, I'm sorry, it's Kate. I should just say I'm getting some text. I'm afraid we may lose some council members in the next 10 to 15 minutes. And so I just want to make sure that we get through your and the other two presentations. So I don't know if that's possible to speed a little, but that would be great.
Okay, great. Okay, I will speed through. Ultimately, what we're seeing here is a result of our collaboration with Dr. Grossman on developing an extension, a DWR extension for the Urban Streams Grant Program. Similar to what you saw from the SALT program, we're able to pinpoint our grant applications and then ultimately apply those grant application information into a scoring criteria. And let's jump to the next slide. In the scoring, we brought together, obviously, the data sets, the aquatic data sets, which were incredibly important to this particular grant program since it's focused at urban streams restoration. Using those data sets, we worked with Dr. Grossman and the CBI and UC Davis teams to come up with a scoring criteria, weighting criteria that allowed us to measure and score values across those data sets for each of the grant programs. So ultimately, it now improved our ability to put the grants that we received into a context of greater value in the landscape in the way we could use this tool. So let's go on to the last slide. Okay, so I'll leave it at that, and we'll do any questions later on then. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ted. Really appreciate it and seeing your application to the work that you've been doing. And I think we have 2 more presentations. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. I thank you, Ted. I'd like to take us back to the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program and introduce Shanna Atherton, who's the Associate Environmental Planner in the Division of Land Resource Protection of the Department of Conservation, and who will share the work that we did in terms of using this tool to evaluate SALT program. Shanna, take it away.
Thanks, Denny, and good afternoon, everyone. As Denny said, my name is Shauna Atherton. I'm an associate environmental planner with the department, as well as the SALC acquisitions team lead. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you briefly about how SALC has utilized REPLAN over the past year and a half. In 2019, Denny approached us to utilize REPLAN to perform a retrospective analysis of the first 4 rounds of SALC project awards to determine how well the selected project met program priorities using the spatial data that was available in REPLAN. We worked together to identify available statewide data sets related to 3 program priorities in particular: agricultural land, risk of conversion to residential or rural residential development, and environmental co-benefits. And we had some mixed success with that. We particularly worked with Benny to customize the tool with various agricultural data sets, including the farmland mapping and monitoring program data, the soil agricultural groundwater banking index data, natural resources conservation service grazing data, as well as information about total carbon stocks contained in the lab, which Denny which Denny was able to obtain from CARB, and a land use change model. The tool already included a diverse array of environmental co-benefits, as the previous speaker noted. So we didn't really need to pull those in, but we did very much utilize those. Once all of the data that we needed was brought in, Replan helped us really visualize and get a general sense of where our program is meeting certain priorities and where we have room to improve, as well as identifying data gaps related to particular priorities. So for example, over 2/3 of the acres selected for conservation in rounds 1 through 4 provide moderate or greater ecoregional biodiversity benefits. About 18% of the total funded project acres include prime statewide or locally important farmland, while 60% cover rangeland, and the remaining acreage was unmapped. Now that difference seems big, but it's largely because rangeland projects that we receive and fund just tend to be larger in general. So that's one of the main reasons for that difference. Next slide. We were also able to use Replan to supplement our staff evaluations of environmental co-benefits to understand total carbon stock contained within the property, though we didn't include that in our analysis, as well as to do an informal assessment of the climate sensitivity faced by each property during our round 5 and 6 application reviews. And moving forward, we can utilize Replan, we can continue to utilize Replan to supplement this component of our application evaluations. Replan really provides us with an objective way to assess the environmental co-benefits in particular of each project, and it provides us with information about the larger geographic context of each project beyond what applicants may be able to provide us. And while we haven't yet shifted exclusively to relying on Replan to score the environmental co-benefits component of each application, we are evaluating whether or not there's a larger role for it to play in future rounds of funding. In conjunction with staff evaluations, the tool has also helped us to demonstrate some trade-offs between different priorities, such as supporting infill development and protecting lands with the greatest environmental co-benefits, particularly biodiversity, and to find those projects that best meet both goals. That said, in order for Replan to become a tool that staff use as a core component of our evaluation process, we would need to see additional improved data on land use change trends, particularly lands at risk of conversion to non-agricultural uses within Replan in order for us to utilize it to evaluate the threat of conversion to individual properties. The model that we had selected initially had some pretty significant limitations when it came to that. The expansion of Replan's functionality to include a model like this would significantly increase its usefulness for our purposes, and in doing so could improve its functionality for land use planners more broadly. And that's it from me, Denny.
Great, thanks, Shauna.
Thanks, Shauna.
And so final presentation relative to its application is I'd like to introduce Amrit Gunasakara, who's a science advisor to the California Department of Food and Agriculture, Secretary Ross. Over to you, Amrit.
Hi, thanks, Danny. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the council. I will be brief and I'll even skip some slides in the process. So I just want to say how we have used, show and say how we have used Replan to fit into a healthy soils program that y'all probably know about. And just talk a tiny bit about the history and collaboration with Dr. Grossman. Next slide, please. I should say I also manage the Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation with the Healthy Soils Program is under. So we started with the Healthy Soils Program in 2015 with the International Year of the Soils, established by the UN FAO. It has really two components, but I'm going to focus on the incentive program, which is really about assisting farmers and ranchers and allowing them to implement conservation management practices that improve soil health, sequester carbon, and reduce greenhouse gases. We also have a demonstration piece that helps with outreach and education on these healthy soils practices. I won't focus on that because we didn't use replan for that. We've got a lot of funding to date for these this program and projects on the ground that are being implementing management practices to build on those efforts. 5% of the funds allocated for technical assistance, and we do offer multiple benefits in this program. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can skip this one. I'll come back to this one in the next slide. Okay, let's go one more, please. Thank you. So here's some of our requirements for the Healthy Soils program. And in the interest of time, I won't go over each one, but let me pick out one or two. We had to identify the management practices they're going to be using. There's 27 of those. And then they also had to pick out their location. You know, where's the field? Show us where the field is so we can do follow up with the verification, make sure that that's the field you did it on and that's the practice you used. But we can if you must click one more, please. Perfect. The point is the applicant had to move away from the application when they were filling it out more than 7 times to different tools and then come back to the application with information to input their required information. So I think this was even more complicated than our tax system that we have. Even our tax system doesn't allow this. So we really needed to rethink how we did this and make the user experience much more friendly. Okay, next slide, please. And we ran into some huge problems with this process. You know, we got maps with no labels. We got folks printing out maps on a web-based software and drawing in things. We got low resolution maps where we couldn't really understand where the plots are. So we really needed a tool to make this user experience much easier for the applicant. Next slide, please. Okay, so the questions were, can we get all this done in one tool? And by the way, we didn't have a lot of time. And next slide, please. And so we tried to see if replan would work for all these different processes. And we found that applicants, after we built the replan tool, only had to move away from the application once to get all the information below. Next slide, please. And it came in a nice PDF document that they then go ahead and apply on the back end to the application. Super easy, really professional looking. I want to just show you the screenshots from actual, well, this is an example project, but they're really professionally done. Next slide, please. And this is the best part, the user experience, including drawing different squares and polygons and really identifying where this field is and assigning your practice to it. This is everything that the user would do on their end using the replan tool, what Denny and his team were able to get for us as a product. Next slide, please. So here's a summary slide and one more click, please. So basically now the user had to move away from the application only one time, and that was the replan tool to get all this done. The other one time they had to move away was the quantification methodology. So we moved from about, hey, having to go away from the application about 10 times down to 2. Next slide, please. We got a lot of positive feedback on this user experience, really because of the replan tool. We couldn't believe that this is how it worked out. I first heard about the replan tool at the Biodiversity Council, listening to Denny Grossman, Dr. Grossman present on it, and just thought there could be lots of potential one day in CDFA. I want to say that he has a unique contractual process. It can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years to get this done through an IT shop. And so this allowed us to get this done in a really fast time. So we really value this. And SGC has really been a key to getting this done. I really appreciate his coordination with us. He's just incredible to work with, come and spoken to our IT office to explain things further that I didn't know about. And then appreciate his participation in the CDF Environmental Farming Act and its advisory panel on replan. That's a scientific body where we move all our programmatic frameworks through. Okay, I think that's it. Next slide.
Chair Gordon?
Yep.
Yes.
Can I interrupt to show how much we appreciate Dr. Grossman's great work and collaboration and helping us come up with this really user-friendly tool that our applicants love? We had this really nice unframed certificate to present to you the next time we see you in person, Dr. Grossman. Thank you for all of your help and collaboration on this.
Oh, that's so nice. Karen, can you hold it up to your camera so we can see it? Oh, look at that.
Thank you.
That's really nice. Thank you. That's a really lovely gesture. Thanks so much. And thanks, Denny, for all your work. And Amrit, was that the end of your presentation? I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yes, Chair, that's it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Dr. Gunasekara and Secretary Ross for those comments. And so I just wanted to make a couple summary points and then open this up for discussion, which Louise will lead that. But so obviously sustainable regional planning decisions should be informed by California's rich collection of data. And the RCA process and the partnership really helped develop the methods and products to demonstrate how valuable this information is. And then in order to integrate these data sets and planning tools so that people can actually use them, we've then worked as a really collaborative team to develop replan to advance this. And then the ability to customize this as the core tool to address some of the issues that we've talked about today really helped to advance specific program objectives while ensuring that they're aligned with the broader state planning objectives. Increases the efficiency of proposal development, submission, and evaluation, and really helps us centralize and standardize project and program information so that it's really available for tracking and monitoring and reporting into the future. So I appreciate the ability to summarize and present this information, and I'll turn it back to Louise for discussion on this going forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Denny. And just recognition for this being several years of hard work. I remember when I first came into my job last January, hearing about this work and really exciting to see it being used and contributing directly to SALC, which is of course a program where we just spent a bunch of time on today. So really appreciate all your time and the other agencies as well. Louise?
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody. I hope that was helpful. We've been really excited about the applications and uses of the tool. Would love to open it up for questions if anybody has any or any thoughts, just really open it up at this point to council members.
I am not seeing hands. Any council members want to weigh in on this really comprehensive?
A quick question for Dr. Grossman and Louise, and that is, do you see other program areas that you want to pursue to make sure we're getting this used as extensively as possible across our government agencies?
I think Denny could speak to some of the other partnerships that he's seen. I think, and I'll just be honest, there is a challenge in trying to sustain a tool and sort of figuring out what does that look like. But I think what's been really exciting with Replan and with Data Basin is the structure that's been set up with a shared master agreement through the Department of Technology, which has enabled other departments to come in and use this tool. And so that's been a really nice approach. And I think I think there's many opportunities we see that you could apply a tool like this. And then Shauna alluded also to something in her presentation that I think would be very interesting, which is how to integrate conversion risk and the development patterns. And that has been harder. And, maybe Denny can speak to it a little bit more. That has been harder. And I think this has been true in many applications where we've been trying to capture sort of what is potential development risk. That has been a challenge to try to get at in this instance, just like it has been in others.
I'll make a couple of comments relative to that. So particularly with the deep relationship that has been developed with the Department of Water Resources, we're exploring a lot of different applications relative to different functions there. And Ted can talk about that because he's coordinating a lot of those. But that's one area. And in terms of moving forward, having discussions with people in other departments, but really wanted to get the first slug of applications done so people could think about sort of how this could be used, and or manage it going into the future and the value of that. One of the, I guess, foreseen values, but it's clearer now, is that not only are we bringing together key data sets that address a lot of the broader state priorities, but we're also identifying what data sets are really required that we don't have right now that really would be valuable to work together to develop. And two, I'll underscore, one is what Shauna and Louise just brought up, is we really wanted to, one of the SALC's pillars was to address those lands that are in high risk of conversion. And so what we really looked across within partners and data is to how can we represent this most effectively? We work closely with USGS that's done a lot of modeling of development and conversion and pushed their data, with their collaboration as far as we could. But we realize that there's a lot more that needs to be done in terms of really being able to map out places with the highest risk of conversion. So that's something that needs to be done. And then the other piece that is really valuable, which relates to that, is to look at the general plans and to look at those the different zoning in those places where there already has been a decision relative to how different lands are going to be used. And the last product we had that standardized and integrated zones in county zoning plans was back in 2007. And so this really is hindering our ability to really reflect on those lands that really have already been slated for different uses. So just to summarize, we really are identifying those really key data sets that we should all be working together to help develop and integrate into one common tool.
Thanks so much.
May I ask a question?
Chancellor Munoz, go ahead. Inaugural question at a council meeting. Very exciting.
Okay, terrible amount of pressure now. Just curious, as I was listening to the description of the tool, and who would it simply be regional sort of planners that would have access, or would there be broad access among others? For example, I noticed earlier in the presentation, some studies had been undertaken by a group at UC Davis. We have faculty here at Merced that are doing work in carbon sequestration, soil analysis, obviously forestry and other areas. And I'm just curious whether people in whether researchers and research units would have access to this information. As you well know, when you're developing proposals for example, NSF and other federal entities, they'll ask you about regional data, regional information that makes your proposal much more formidable with its accuracy and amount of detail. So I see a great deal of information being maybe available to those that would petition for grants, large grants, to undertake studies that would have relevance to our region. And so would these kinds of groups have access to this tool?
Thank you for the question, because you embarrassed me by showing me that I left out a really critical piece of information, which Louise just put in the chat box. Now, a key piece of what we're trying to do is make this information available for everyone, to make it broadly available. And so if you go to the chat box or just go to replan-tool.org, you will have access to all the information and all the functionality within the core Replan tool at this point in time. And you can also use that to link into sort of the mother database, which is database. And if you want to download any of these data sets directly, or it'll direct you to the source of the data itself. So the answer is a resounding yes. That was a key piece of it.
Denny, if we were to make just that link available, for example, to people at UC A&R, you're talking about hundreds of researchers across the state. Karen knows these groups quite well. I mean, I think that's an important step to have this information being accessed by any number of constituencies that activate this important information in ways that are meaningful and additive to what we're trying to accomplish. But thank you.
I agree.
Thank you. Great question. I have a question from Deputy Secretary Hansen.
Hi, Denny, thanks thank you for the presentation. I'm noting the time, so I'll just ask quickly, maybe we can follow up later. I was just curious if you could just quickly describe some of the ways that future climate change impacts are built into this tool and the data that is used to make those impacts known to users.
Sure. So we basically want to demonstrate the importance of including that information. I would say that the tool has some steps to go in order to really have all the data sets that we would ultimately like to have in there in the future. There's two climate ensemble data. One is in atmospheric climate, where the models all agree in terms of a certain amount of atmospheric change. And that's included there in terms of climate sensitivity and exposure. And then there's also an ensemble of models that address the soil's resilience to climate change. And so those are the two that we have in there, but we really have identified that this is a place where we really need to connect more deeply with a number of broader, well-recognized and well-used state data sets.
And just on that, I would add, Denny and I have talked about this quite a bit, is that the ability to bring in other data sets. You could bring in data from CalAdapt, for instance. You could bring in some of the projection data like extreme heat or any of those data sets that exist in CalAdapt could be brought in. And another that's in there already is like CalEnviroscreen data are in there. So you can actually start to overlay some of those data sets.
And how, sorry if I missed this, how hard or easy is that? Is this at this point sort of crowdsourced in that people, or open source so people can add data sets, or is it really still owned by you all and sort of that would have to be a process through wherever this sits now, DWR, I think.
So it's very easy, in answer to part of your question, to add additional data sets. And I think through the panelists, they represented different groups of either water data or ag data that we basically either added to the core part of the tool or to an extension that actually addressed their specific pieces of that. In answer to the other part of the question, we do not have the capability right now for individuals to have the source to be able to put data in the tool itself. But as Louise referred to, there is an umbrella agreement between the California Department of Technology and our technical partners to allow for any improvements to the tool to be, in terms of additional data sets or functionality or reporting capabilities, to be able to implement it very, very quickly rather than going through a whole process. But there is the ability to build an independent tool that we would have complete control of. If in fact we saw that valuable, we just were trying to get something this far along so we could reflect on that and decide its future trajectory.
Thanks, Denny. And Amanda, it looked like you might have a follow-up question just from your, okay. It's hard to read Zoom body language, I'm like, is she sitting forward? Is she sitting back? Other comments, questions from the council? I'm not seeing any. This has just been really, really helpful. And it's nice to have everything grouped into a meeting about all of these things that are related to natural working lands and land conservation and land use. And I think the last thing I'll say is just, to me, it also just underscores, again, what I always think of as the flip side of the coin, which is the critical need to do aggressive compact development and housing development in infill areas, which is the other side of this conversation. Sometimes we can go down the really critical path of how important it is to conserve land and to have it be resilient and to have it be, which it is, and to have it be such a critical part of our climate picture. But the other side of that is that we have really critical housing needs in this state. And there's an enormous amount, as many of our agencies and mine, I think in particular, have spent time talking about it, along with HCD and transportation, lots and lots of opportunity to develop housing in this state, in every single county, on land that is compact and has low vehicle miles traveled and is not on these conserved lands. So that's the other side of the coin. And I know Secretary Castro Ramirez's life is about that. Secretary Kim and Darwin's lives are about that to a great extent. But I think, that's the piece we didn't talk about as much today, but it is there throughout this discussion. So it really struck me while we were talking. And with that question, we didn't have any comment cards for this item, but does anybody in the public have a comment on this item or on anything on the agenda before we close out the meeting? And if so, raise your hand in the participant box.
And you do that by the raise hand button in Zoom or by pressing *9 if you're calling in. But I'm not seeing any action in there, Kate.
I'm not either. And so I think, if I'm not wrong, now I'm sort of afraid I'm wrong on everything on this agenda. If I'm not wrong, I think that
you're right. You're right. Okay, you're right.
I just want to really thank everybody as we close out what has been just an unbelievable year in so many ways. Thank all of you for sticking with us on Zoom, for your continued work in this space, your continued commitment. Really, another thanks to Louise, to Sandra, to Doug, to Fabiha, to Jesse, I'm going to forget people, to everybody on the just incredible SGC team, to Ryan, to Saharnaz, for just continuing to make sure that the programs that we all spend time thinking about and arguing about and funding are implemented in the most inclusive and sustainable way possible. Really proud to be part of this state team and this broader team of our public members and our regional local partners, and just to work with all of you every day. So thank you to all of you. And with that,
happy holidays.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks.